Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Aaron Camaro from the Decibel Geek podcast. You probably know me better as the rock and roll ring announcer. And I'm here to tell you, if you are a fan of professional wrestling, then you are in the right place. Give me back my pro wrestling coming at you right now with Jimmy Streak and the Plastic Sheik. Rock and roll.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
This is Steve Bowtie Bryant here. Back in the 90s, I was a pro wrestling photographer for the South, and I released what might have been one of the original sets of indie trading cards. I ran across some of these original sets. They were up in Randall Fanning's attic all this time. PG-13 rookie card, Ricky Morton, George Weingroff as the Sheik, Chris Champion, Reno Riggins, Billy Montana, Gary Valiant, the Scorpion, the Medic, Rick Reynolds, Jeff Daniels, Mephisto and Dante, Ben Jordan, Steve Neely, Marcus Woodrow, Clinton Charisma, Little Farmer John. If you'd like an opportunity to get these cards, contact me now. You can get them for only $49.99. Contact me at Steve Bowtie Bryant at iCloud.com. Get your set now while supplies last.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
For those who don't know, now you know, baby. This is Hot Rod Biggs, Jared, Jimmy Street. We're going to take them to the limit one more time, baby, right here on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one more time to the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast, and I'm here as always with my brother from the same father and mother, the Plastic Sheik, Jared Street. What's up, bro? How you doing?
Oh, man, just living life. How about yourself?
Yeah, about the same, man. About the same. Just getting ready to, get our good buddy Aaron Camaro on here and have a good conversation with him. I'm excited. He and I share a lot of history, and be very cool to get to go over that again. Not every guest I want to bore with my details, but
yeah, it's a cool guy, for us both, but especially for you, man. He's a big rock and roll guy, and I know that you all have that connection as well as wrestling, so that's always cool, man.
Oh, yeah, definitely a rock and roll guy. Of course, he's the co-host with the Mo-host on the Decibel Geek podcast. They've been doing that for like 12 years and really got to do some cool stuff. And they do a whole convention, the Rockin' Pod convention. I mean, they're kind of a big deal. So, Aaron, even though he and I have this connection in wrestling, he's got a whole lot of things going on in music, and it's very cool. But, it really fits because he's definitely he's got that vibe, that rock and roll kind of vibe. And I thought it was cool that he brought that to wrestling, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's with entrance music and everything else, the rockin' wrestling back in the day and just everything else, it's a good fit.
It is. It really is. And, of course, we had our previous guest, with Jim Powell, Dirty White Boy Jimmy Powell, with Quentin as our special guest co-host. Man, that was a lot of fun. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it. Yeah. Everybody seemed to enjoy that one quite a bit. And we definitely appreciate y'all checking that one out. Hopefully we'll have some more guests very similar to him coming very soon. I know, we've got some big plans, and Quentin's sending me names all the time. So we'll have more of his on very soon. I'm very sure of that. So, yeah. But,
good.
Yeah. And, other than that, I don't really have a whole lot. I am going to the Jackson, Tennessee. I am going to the official Memphis Hall of Fame ceremony in Jackson, Tennessee. That ought to be a lot of fun. PG-13, the Rock and Roll Express, Handsome Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant getting inducted, Dirty White Boy, the Tony Anthony version. Lots of great Dr. Tom Pritchard, I mean, so many cool guys are getting in, that year. So it's really going to be a fun time, and I'm blessed to be able to do it, and it'll be fun to get to hang out with Wolfie and hang out with a bunch of the Memphis wrestling legends, man. It's going to be exciting for me.
Yeah, I think you'll have a blast, brother. Hate I couldn't be there too, but it is what it is. It's
well, I like Ben Jordan replaced you on the Steve Neely show. I'm going to have Ben riding with me. That ought to be fun, just for laughs and fun. So I'm excited to be able to pick him up and take him with me and hang out with him too. So be a lot of fun, and hopefully get to meet a few guys that we've never met, and maybe get my foot in the door. We can get us some more guests on here, that we don't have to pay $25,000 for.
$25,000.
Yeah. A little inside joke with the Sheik and I. But anyway, today we have Aaron Camaro. Very excited to have him on. And I think let's go ahead and get the man on. What do you say?
That sounds great, brother. Let's do it.
All right. We'll be right back with more from Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling and the Mouth of the North, Aaron Camaro.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
This is Kroll, and you're listening to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling with Jimmy Street and Jared the Plastic Sheik. Be sure to like, subscribe, and view all of our USWO and Saw Wrestling content at Nashville Wrestling Network, exclusively on YouTube.
All right, we are back with Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling. And y'all, just like I said in the intro, honestly, this podcast might not exist. My time with Wolfie D on the Live and in Color with Wolfie D podcast might not exist if not for our guest today. This person not only put me in touch and in direct contact with some of the all-time greats of this business, honestly, he got me in the real part of the business. And I got to introduce him as the one and only. But to be honest, I love this guy like a brother and would take a bullet for him right now. In the one and only Mouth of the North, Aaron Camaro. Aaron, welcome to the show, my friend.
Man, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on this show with you guys. For a show that has provided me so much entertainment since you guys have been doing it, and talk to guys that I consider to be legends. I love what you're doing. It's an honor to be here. That's a hell of an introduction, man. How do I live up to that?
Oh, man, you're going to do great. And thank you, brother. I mean, seriously, not only does that compliment and what you're saying, it means so much more from you, because not only because you have been a podcaster as long as there have been podcasts, man. So we're going to get into that. But just know that Aaron Camaro is the man, not only in wrestling, but in podcasting. And we thank him so much for being here. Sheik, we always start with you on your first question. Take it away.
I'm ready for this, man. It's an honor to have Aaron here, and I'm ready to get it going. So, Aaron, I know you're a listener to the show, so you're going to know my first question. Answer whatever way you want. It's your Mount Rushmore, 4 or 5 guys that have influenced you. You like to watch. You liked what they did. Whatever in the wrestling business. Give us 4 or 5 names.
All right. Well, number one, I got to give it to the Crusher. Milwaukee Crusher, the guy that got me into wrestling even before I even understood what I was seeing on the TV. When my grandpa would sit me on his knee and him and his brother-in-law would sit there and hoot and holler at the TV, man, it was the Crusher. And the first time I ever saw professional wrestling was an AWA show. And it was on TV at my Uncle Roger's house. And I remember looking at it and really being old enough to kind of figure out what I'm looking at. And it's the Crusher, and he's fighting Baron von Raschke, and I'm blown away by it, So, I know you talk to a lot of good old Southern wrestlers, which I got a lot of love and respect for, but I'm from Wisconsin. So number one, it's got to be the Crusher.
I love that.
All right. Number 2, man, I got to give it up for Hulk Hogan. You know, Hulk Hogan was the guy when I was a little kid that nobody could beat. You know, he was the man, you know. And growing up and, you know, getting into wrestling and everything and following WWF, because all we got in Wisconsin where I lived was AWA and WWF. And like those NBC Saturday night shows where you'd actually get to see some real matches, you know, instead of just you always knew on Saturday morning who was going to win and who was going to lose when the match started, you know, but those shows on Saturday nights, man. But really, what really, really made me love and appreciate Hulk Hogan was years later when he joined the NWO, because it blew my mind. Like, how can this happen? You know, Hulk Hogan is the number one good guy that there has ever been. You know, I could never imagine that Hulk Hogan would ever turn his back on the fans, you know, and I was just blown away by that. And that pulled me into wrestling that much more. So, I mean, I was a happy person to be alive during the Monday Night Wars to see, you know, everything that was going on. And man, I love the NWO. And even back then, everyone was saying Hogan needs to retire. He's old, you know, and look at it, the career he had after that, you know. I mean, you got to give it to the guy to be the number one babyface on the entire planet one day, one leg drop later on the Macho Man Randy Savage. You are universally hated. Right. And I've always loved and respected Hogan for that. And man, I'm a huge fan. So we got the Crusher, we got Hogan. Number 3, man, I got to give it to Kurt Angle. Man, Kurt Angle is out of this world, man. You look at him in his prime, and he did some amazing stuff. And to be a dude that just gets pulled from another place, which is real wrestling, you know, Olympic-style wrestling, and get thrown into it and just adapt perfectly and be funny and but legitimate. Like, you look at the WWE roster back then and be like, if this shit was real, Kurt Angle would be the champion and he'd never lose it to anybody.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
But then all the other aspects that he was able to bring into it and just the quality of matches that guy had over the years. Number 3, I got to give it to Kurt Angle.
I love that.
Let's see. You know,
but he's never had a 5-star match.
That's crazy. I don't buy that.
Isn't that ridiculous?
It is.
Come on. Ridiculous. Almost all of Kurt Angle's matches were 5-star matches, in my opinion.
Exactly.
That leads me into one of my favorite matches of all time and one of my favorite wrestlers all time. And most people will probably laugh at this and not get it. But my number 4 spot on my personal wrestling monument of the top 4 guys, I got to give it to Ken Anderson, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah.
So, like I told you, I'm from Wisconsin. Right. And in that time, you know, there wasn't a whole lot going on in WWE. You know, it was Cena and Batista, you know, and that was the most of it. But then this guy, Ken Anderson, comes around and he talks like me, you know, but he's like a lippy guy from Wisconsin, but he fights and backs it up. And I thought, man, this is like having the Green Bay Packers in the WWE. And I was all about some Ken Anderson. Yeah. And I actually years later got to work a show with Ken and got to tell him, man, hey, man, thank you for representing Wisconsin in such an awesome way. And he was like, awesome. Man, I appreciate you saying that, you know. So there you go. That's my Mount Rushmore. I bet you nobody else matches that one.
No, never.
That's a good one. That's a good one, though.
I mean, I think we've heard Hogan a few times, which is natural, but I don't think we've ever heard the Crusher. We've never heard Kurt Angle, unfortunately, unless I'm forgetting, and that's ridiculous. So. And Ken Anderson, man, that's so cool, especially with the connective tissue there, especially being a Wisconsin boy. You got to love that, man. I love that. That's a great Mount Rushmore.
Like I said, it was like cheering for the Packers.
Exactly. I mean, that's it, man. You know, and it's funny to me, you know, we can talk about this too, but Wisconsin to me always seemed out of place because it always felt to me like more of a Rust Belt. Is it? It's not in the Rust Belt, is it? But it always felt like a Rust Belt state, like a real blue collar, you know, good hearted folks that work hard, come home, you know, but then you guys are in the Midwest, and then you're got the winners that would kill a normal man, a Southern man, at least, you know? And I mean, but, you know, and then of course you got the Packers and you got the Brewers and you've got, you know, all these teams from there. Of course, the Badgers, I got to say the Badgers too, right? You got to give love.
Well, let me tell you this from a pro wrestling point of view. it was kind of a dead zone.
Right.
You know, growing up, like I said, you'd get AWA on TV and you get WWF on TV, but rarely did they ever come around to where I lived. Yeah. And wrestling was like, when I moved down to Tennessee, it was a whole revelation to me. Like, this is awesome. Everybody believes in pro wrestling here. Yeah. You know, in Wisconsin, my dad would tell me all the time, you know, that shit's fake. You know, I don't understand why you like that stuff. It's so stupid, you know. And he would tell me that all the time, you know. And so then I would, like, then my dad would say, you know, if I took this guy and I punched him in the face and then stomped on him in his face, you know, guess what happens? The fight's over. And I think about that and be like, you know, that actually makes sense. But then the mistake my dad made was, instead of turning me away from it, then I was that much more interested. So if that's what this really is, then how does this all work?
Yeah.
So then I'm buying all the magazines and trying to learn everything I can about pro wrestling, which you couldn't learn nothing about pro wrestling back then, but back when you're young, it's just fun to be a fan and keep up with it all.
Yeah.
Or learn about guys that you never knew about. You know, I never had a chance to see Ric Flair or Jerry the King Lawler in Wisconsin, but I sure read about them in those magazines.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because you're talking so much about the AWA. Obviously, one of our very early guests, you know, 50 episodes ago now, it was Greg Gagne. And I thought about you that entire episode, man. And that led me to talk to you about doing an eventual AWA. And unfortunately, that went by the wayside. We started doing interviews. And now I'm much more happy to have you to tell your story, because I'm much more interested in doing that. We can save the AWA idea. I want to learn about Aaron Camaro. And so obviously you've told us you're from Wisconsin, but I want to get a little specific. So this is my first question I always like to ask. So talk about your younger days, like where were you born, your high school, and then how that led into you liking wrestling.
Like I said, I was a little kid growing up in a little town called Merrill, Wisconsin, up in north central Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And I just would see it on TV. And my grandpa got into it, you know, and then one day I just saw it and was like, you know, I'm a little kid. I'm a Kiss fan.
Yeah.
I love Star Wars.
Okay.
And I love football, you know, and when you look at things like Kiss, Star Wars, and football and comic books, Batman comic books,
right.
You look at, you know, what would happen if you combined all these things?
Right.
Well, you'd end up with professional wrestling, you know?
Yeah.
Good guys, bad guys, you know, characters, you know, different conflicts. And, you know, to me, honestly, it's the greatest art form on the face of the earth. You know, I've got so much respect for professional wrestlers because, you know, an actor will be asked to go perform a role, you know, and you memorize your lines and you do your best and you go out there and you might get multiple takes on that, you know, and that's all fine. And then when it's time to do something, you know, hair raising or death defying, well, we got a stunt double for you. No problem. You know, we'll just have them step in. For a professional wrestler, you have to be an athlete, you have to be an actor, and you have to be damn good at these things. You got to be an improviser. You know, you always have to be on your toes, you know, because things can change out there in a second. And, you know, I've seen some of the greatest professional wrestlers since I moved to Tennessee and got involved in, you know, well, originally ring announcing, and get to stand there ringside and watch these guys do their thing and be like, you know what? You talk to people and they go, well, that shit, you know. And you go, damn, you don't ever go to a movie and be like, that was performed by a stunt man. You know, an actor is nothing. A Hollywood actor that's getting paid billions of dollars to make movies over the course of a few years is nothing compared to a professional wrestler getting in the ring in front of, you know, 200 people in a, you know, National Guard armory somewhere. Right. And putting on a hell of a match that they go home with and talk about and can't wait to come see the next one.
Yeah.
You know, and everything's live, everything's on the spot. You only got one shot at that to make it look good, to make it be good. You know, so I've got massive respect for professional wrestlers. And you know what? Since I moved to Tennessee and got involved, that respect is just grown immensely. You know, like it's unbelievable. Like I said, greatest art form on the face of the earth. I stand by that.
Oh, dude. Real quick, you said the 4 horsemen of awesome, too, by the way. You said Kiss, you said comic books, you said football, and you said pro wrestling. Yeah. So that's like the 4 horsemen of awesome.
Boy, it's hard to understand how we could all be such great friends around here, huh?
I know, right? And Star Wars, too. Don't forget Star Wars. That's the...
That's the 5th horseman. That's J.J. Dillon.
Yeah, something, man. It's one of them. Lex Luger, whatever. But, yeah.
All right. So, Aaron, everybody's got to notice if they don't know you on here and they're listening, they've got to notice how good a voice you have for something like this. So talk to us about your radio days.
So and this is funny because this is kind of like pro wrestling where you kind of, backdoor your way into things.
Right.
I never went to radio school. I had no business applying for that job that day.
Yeah.
I was working at some scrub job, as we all know, we've all had.
Yep.
And got laid off. Well, I'm staying with my mom, who's recently divorced, and I'm helping her out with the rent, living down in the basement. I got a pretty sweet spot down there, and I blew my money the week before, depending on the next paycheck coming around. But then there was like a half a paycheck coming.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I'm driving home and I'm thinking, man, I messed up. I shouldn't have spent that money, out having a good time. I should have saved it for my rent, and now what am I going to do? What am I going to tell my mom? And on the radio on the way home, they say, hey, this is Z104 WJMT. We're looking for radio announcers. And I go, well, I'm never going to get that job. But if I apply for it, I can at least tell my mom I applied at the radio station, and maybe she'll think that's cool enough to cut me a little slack. Maybe she won't be so mad.
Yeah.
And so I go down there and I go, hey, my name's Aaron. What do I got to do to apply? And they said, well, fill out this paperwork and make a tape, and I have no clue. So I say, well, tape of what? And they go, tape of yourself reading something. I go, okay, all right. So I go hop back in the car, and now I'm driving, and I'm thinking, what if I gave this my best shot? Maybe I could be good at it.
Yeah.
And so I stop at the grocery store. I grab a Metal Edge magazine, bring it back to the house. I read an article about Ozzy in one of those old school double tape deck karaoke machines.
Nice.
Yeah, I know you remember them. Anybody that's above a certain age listening to the show just went like, I remember those. And immediately, like as soon as it filled out the paperwork real quick, the application, and went and listened to the tape, and I was like, you know what? That ain't bad.
Yeah.
So I immediately went right back to the radio station. I didn't wait till the next day. I didn't, wait till a couple of days later. I went right back, and I said, here you go. And the guy goes, well, sit down here for a minute. And I remember sitting in the studio, and there was a guy named Nick Summers, and he was the big radio star up there, and he was working. And I was like, man, that's the dude right there. I listen to him all the time. He's awesome. And I was like, well, soak it in, man, because you're probably never going to see this again. That dude comes back down the stairs and goes, man, your tape sounds great. When can you start? And I was like, wow. I can start right now. He's like, well, we got to do W-2s, but I'll show you some of the equipment. And that's how I got into radio.
Oh, man, that is awesome. I don't even. Yeah. And those were the heydays of radio, man. That was when it was awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It wasn't all satellite based or whatever. This was an amazing time for radio. Not only was it an amazing time for wrestling and Kiss and Star Wars and all that, it was also an incredible time for radio. I remember listening to the radio. I would call a song in because I wanted to tape it. You know what I mean? And I would be hey, play this song, play, Saigon Kick, Love is on the way, and I'm going to tape it, and they would play it. You know what I'm saying? You would do that.
Yeah.
And
maybe not that song.
Well, I was a cheesier kid. Let's just say that. But you know what I'm saying.
But I know what you're saying. I came up that radio age too with the little tape deck, and you'd wait and hopefully they play that song. Oh, this is what I like. And you hit the 2 buttons together, the play and the record at the same time.
Yeah.
We're all just dating ourselves here, talking about karaoke machines and recording off the radio. Like, how old are these guys? I thought Camaro was way younger than that.
He's in his 20s. He's forever 29, right? Or 27.
Right, yeah, sure.
So did you get involved in wrestling in Wisconsin? I feel like you did, right? Didn't you? Some?
A little bit. I used my radio job as a way to get in with people that were running shows, but they were running shows in parks and restaurant parking lots.
Gosh.
And so...
Wow.
I mean, I did like a little bit of training, and I was like, yeah, I'm not athletic enough for this shit. And but I had my voice and I had my job. So I would like sneak in little promotions for them when I was on the air.
Yeah.
So in Wisconsin, I really didn't do a whole lot. It really didn't take off for me until I visited Tennessee for the first time. Okay. And my brother was already living down here. He was from Wisconsin. He moved down here, met himself a wife, and took her back home, caveman style, Northwoods. And but at the time, he was living down here, and he was like, "You got to come down here." I said, "Yeah, why?" And he says, "They have shows down here every Wednesday night at the fairgrounds, and you literally never know who's going to show up." It was the early days of TNA.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I said, "You know what? I'm going to come down and visit." And so I came down here one time, brought a girl with me, came down here, visited. He took me to one of them shows, and I was blown away. It was like, I've never, you would never see something like this in central Wisconsin, Yeah. And I was like, man, and I looked at Jeremy Borash in that wrestling ring in the middle of the fairgrounds, and it's like this, you can feel the history of the place, and the people are going nuts for the show, and the talent is, top notch. And like he said, one night it might be Dusty Rhodes. The next night it might be Roddy Piper. The next week it might be, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. You just never knew who was going to show up then. And I looked at Jeremy Borash in that ring at the fairgrounds, and I nudged my brother one night, and I said, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to be in that ring in the middle of this fairgrounds. I'm going to do that someday. And he was like, yeah, right. Let's see you do it. And that's really where it started for me. It was like, Tennessee, there's an opportunity here for a guy like me to live out what I've always dreamed of, what everybody always told me was stupid. Here in Nashville, this stuff is loved. It's revered, it's respected, and I think I could get into this if I could just figure out how. And then from there, I just started going to local shows, trying to figure something out, trying to see how it all worked. And then I got my opportunity out in Millersville at the Sawmill. Krull and TJ and Paul Adams and Reno Riggins, they were the bosses, the conglomerate, I guess, Yeah. And I answered an ad on Craigslist, of all things. Nice. And they said they were looking for people, and it didn't really say what, So I just said to the wife, I'm going to go down there at this time. I think I messaged them, and they said, we'll come down here at this time. And I told the wife, I'm going to go. And she's like, cool, go for it. So then I went, and it was kind of a weird situation. So I walk in, and you can tell, there's a ring set up in the middle. There's chairs set up all over the place. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. So then I meet Krull, and I meet Reno and Paul Adams and TJ Weatherby. And we sit down, and they say, what can you do? And I said, well, I've got a radio background. All right, I got to take a step back from this story. So I know a week ahead of time that I'm doing this, right? And the week before, there's a show at the fairgrounds where the main event is Jerry the King Lawler versus Sid Vicious. And in Sid Vicious' corner is Jimmy Hart, the mouth of the South. So I know a little bit about wrestling at this point. I kind of understand the gist of it. It's real, but if you can make it work for you in a way that isn't 100% legit, that's okay, because it's pro wrestling. That's forgivable sometimes. So what I do is that night of the show, my wife, myself, and my son, we go to the show, and at intermission, Jimmy Hart's over there signing stuff. I know I've got this, I think, an audition. I'm not sure what it is with Saw that following Friday. And so at intermission, when the lights come back down and everybody leaves, I slide over by Jimmy Hart and I go, hey, man, I'm a huge fan. I've been watching you since I was a little kid. You were the worst. That makes you the best. You were awesome. And I go, hey, man, listen, and I know I sound stupid when I say this, and I'm kind of doing it on purpose. Sure. I say, hey, man, if I ever had a chance to get into pro wrestling, do you think I could call myself the mouth of the North? Because I'm from Wisconsin, and my friends say I got a big mouth. And Jimmy Hart is such a nice guy. He looks over at me, and I know what he's thinking. You stupid idiot. And he goes, yeah, sure, baby. God bless. So fast forward back to where we were. I'm meeting the guys out at Saw, and they're going, what can you do? I can talk. I can talk. And I said, I don't want to get hit with a chair. I don't want nobody to jump on me. I'm not a wrestler, but I can talk, I think I can do something. I help you guys out. And they go, yeah, okay, all right. And I go, oh, and by the way, I just met my friend Jimmy Hart last weekend, and he told me if I want to go by the mouth of the North, he's cool with that. And they go, oh.
Yeah.
So I saved it. I had it in my pocket just in case I wasn't getting the reaction that I'd hoped for. And then I got to the point where it's like, okay, play the Jimmy Hart card, even though it's bullshit. And so I did. And the funny thing was they're like, okay, we'll hang out for a minute and we'll let you know. And I said, okay. So I'm standing in there, and there's a couple of guys working out in the ring, and there's a couple other dudes standing over here. So I go over to them dudes. I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing? Well, we came down here. We wanted to, be cameramen. And I go, what'd they tell you? They said, well, just to hang out and wait, and they'd let us know in a few minutes. I go, okay. That's been 40 minutes ago now. What the hell's going on? And so I walk outside of the sawmill. I call the wife. I go, this is bullshit. These guys, told me to hang out. Now they're making me wait all this time. I don't know what's going on. And then I realized that people are lining up to the building. And I tell the wife, I think there's a show going on tonight. You know what? Let me go back in one more time, before I come home and say, screw this,
Right.
So then I went back inside, and now I see people are buying tickets and filing in. And I see Kroll, and he's walking up the ramp, and I run over there, go, hey. I said, is there anything I can be doing tonight to help you guys out? And he looks at me and goes, you want a ring announce? And it's funny because my mouth and my heart go, yeah. But then my brain goes, oh, shit, you've never done this before. I was like, whatever, brain. Let's go, because the brain thinks, well, how hard can it be? You think about Howard Finkel. You think about Dave Penzer. How do they do it? On his way to the ring, weighing in at this many pounds, hailing from this town. It's this guy,
Sure.
How hard can it be? So I go backstage, and they're like, okay, you're going to ring announce tonight. And I say, okay, I need a piece of paper and a pen. And they go, what do you need that for? And I said, well, I got to get my notes together. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And they give me a piece of paper and pen. I go around the locker room. I start shaking hands and introducing myself to people. Hey, how's it going? My name's Aaron. I'm going to be your ring announcer for the night. What's your name? Where are you from? What about do you weigh? You got a cool nickname? All right, awesome, man. Can't wait to see you out there. And made my way around the entire locker room. And some of them guys are like, you're really doing all that? And I was like, well, yeah, that's the way that's the way it's done, but these guys have been used to, shitty ass ring announcers. And so I go out there and I do it. I have no idea this is when I walk into the building that this is what I'm doing tonight, but I go out there and I do it. And about halfway through the show, I look over at Reno, who's doing commentary, and he gives me the big thumbs up. And I go, okay, all right, this is going as good as I feel like it's going.
Yeah.
So then after the show, TJ Weatherby comes up to me with an envelope, and I go, what's this?
Yeah. Those awesome envelopes.
And they're like, hey, man, that was great. Can you come back next week? And I was like, hell yeah. And I go out in the parking lot. I open up my envelope. There's $20 in there. I was like, no way, they're going to pay me to do this? Nice. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my start in pro wrestling down here. It's awesome.
Dude, that is incredible. Those envelopes were everything, man. That made you feel like, hey, they're at least thinking I'm worth giving something to for showing up, so those are awesome.
Well, it's been years, and so the statute of limitations is probably up, but, envelopes or baggies back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. All right, so I've heard a story that you were announcing Gary Valiant, and instead of New York City, you announced him from where?
That's a good trivia question.
I've got the answer. I just wanted to see if you could. Arab, Alabama?
I don't know. Was it a rib or something? I remember one time they had me come out, and Jeff Daniels was coming out, and he was wearing some zebra stripe, gear or something. And so they're like, you got to introduce him as Jammin' Jeff Daniels. And I didn't know Jeff that well at that time, and I was like, man, I don't know about this. And they're like, no, trust me. It'll be cool. It'll be cool. It'll be funny. So then I did it, and he got a pretty good laugh out of that. So I remember that one, but I don't remember. And shit, man. I only remember the ribs that Boogie pulled on me.
Yeah.
I think Kroll might have pulled a rib on you, and it was like Arab, Alabama or something.
Either that or he's ribbing us right now. You never know.
Well, I do remember one time Kroll had told me to call his manager at the time. Her name was Miss Boogie, but he had me call her Miss Booty. and that didn't get a very good reaction. Like, I'm out in the middle of the ring looking around like, what's wrong,
So let me tell you something that didn't get a good reaction, Aaron, that Kroll ribbed me on. Okay, so this is when NWA Saul was running and the TV was going, and I'm Jimmy Street. I'm no longer Prince Omar, and obviously, yeah. But hey, we'll talk about that in a second. But Joe Cephas obviously is working there, and Joe was well known to have only used his wife as his manager. She was Gabriella, the slave girl or cave girl or whatever she was, but that was his manager.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm obviously trying to do the Gary Hart gimmick. He's the closest thing we had to Bruiser Brody. So as I'm standing there looking at the monitor, watching what he's about to do, he's in the ring, and then Kroll says, "Go out there and manage him." We told him, he knows. And I go out there and I'm like walking down the ring and Joe's looking at me like, what is this moron about to do here? And I get in the ring and I'm like, hey man, how's it going? I'm managing you tonight. And he's like, what? He was like, no, you're not. He's like, watch the knee. And I'm like, what? And boom, he hits me with the knee and I go out of the ring and that got rid of me. And I walk in the back and they are dying back there. All of them. It was a Kroll rib, man. It was a Kroll rib.
That's funny. That's a good one. Yeah, you got to watch that guy.
Oh, yeah, he's brutal. Yeah.
Joe Cephas was good for a rib, too. He got me one time real good. Made me feel terrible for like 2 seconds. I'm sitting at Crossfire, and this was, of course, God bless him, when Joe Cephas was still alive. And me and him are sitting together, and I go, damn, it's hot in here. And I'm probably wearing a suit jacket and all that shit.
Yeah.
I go, damn, it's hot in here. And he goes, you think you're hot? How do you think she feels? And he points to his wife. But at that time, I didn't know that was his wife. I didn't even really know who she was outside of a quick introduction.
Sure.
And I look at her and I go, yeah, she looks pretty hot to me. And he turns and he looks at me and he stares at me for a second. I'm like, ha, 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 ha. I'm looking at him like, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, yeah.
He goes, hey, man, that's my wife. And I go, oh, dude, oh, man, hey, hang on a second. I was just, and he starts laughing. I go, you.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Oh, man. Okay. Well,
I miss him. He was great.
Oh, man, dude. I miss Joe all the time. I remember when he got the job at NWA and they put him in that question mark gimmick. I sent him a text and I was like, man, I'm so proud of you, brother. I'm glad you're getting to do what you need to do, because he should have been working anywhere that had wrestling going on. I love that guy. Yeah. So good.
Yeah, me too.
I always worked for him in 7 to get a one-on-one, but it never happened. You know how that is. You know the story, but we'll get to that in a minute. But so you're working with Saul, and then a chance, I guess, remind me our little trip to HWA in Laverne. Remind me of that whole story, if you don't mind.
That's a big jump into the future, though.
Okay, well then let's not jump.
Or did we go? Did we go there first?
Yes, we went there first.
No, because you were Jimmy Street out there.
Right. We went there first. That was before I had the Omar gimmick, and that was first. And I'd already used the Omar gimmick, but I'd never used it in Nashville. And you said, "Hey, I want to take over HWA." And this was my first meetup with you, because there's a picture that I've got, and I just remember, and I'm not trying to jump too far in the future. If it is from Saul, let's not do that. But I remember you coming to me and you were like, hey, and so did we meet at the Great Escape eventually? Like, how did we meet up?
So I have always had the innate ability to spot it. Whatever it is, I've always had the ability to spot it. I can see it in other people. Either you got it or you don't,
Sure.
And that's what always made me such a good writer for the wrestling shows. I could tell the guys that could do it and the guys that just couldn't, but be able to help the guys that couldn't, to be able to figure out a way to at least get close.
Right.
And so when I met you, my kid was into G.I. Joe. I was so proud, because I was into G.I. Joe when I was a kid.
Yes.
And you remember Great Escape, and if people aren't from Nashville, Great Escape is a store that has movies, CDs, LPs, toys, comic books, just fun stuff.
Everything.
And back in the day, they used to have the 25-cent boxes, and me and my wife were pretty poor. Man, we built a whole Christmas for that kid off them 25-cent boxes one time. But I'd always been there looking for G.I. Joes for my kid. And that's where I think the conversation with you and I started because, we're nerds. We love G.I. Joe.
Of course.
The 80s version with the characters.
Yes.
And we get talking about that. And then the next thing that obviously comes up is either Kiss, Star Wars, or pro wrestling. I think it was pro wrestling, if I was remember right.
You just always looked like somebody. You know what I mean? Like you were either in rock and roll or wrestling. It had to be one. I knew that, and I saw that in you. I don't say that I have this innate ability. I just feel like I know who the guy is, and you're the guy.
Well, and that's part of what you portray. I learned this from a radio, like a longtime radio host for a long time, years ago. And he told me perception is reality. I go, what does that mean? He goes, if you get on the air right now and you say the radio station is on fire, what do you think's going to happen? I said, well, I would guess the fire department would probably show up and I'd be in big trouble. Yeah. And he goes, exactly. Perception is reality. You can work things to, make the listeners think things, and it's like, oh, okay, I get that. This is all entertainment. And so that was a big help for me when it came to becoming a part of the pro wrestling business. And so when you're doing that, man, I mean, you get lost in it. Yeah. So what was the original question?
We were just, talking about how you and I met up originally.
Okay, all right, yes. Yeah. Okay, I got you. So then you and I started talking wrestling. Mm-hmm. And you tell me you've got some experience, and I say I've got an opportunity. Yeah. So it wasn't so much taking over HWA, because what had happened was I moved out to Laverne and there was a promotion literally a mile from my house.
Right.
And I was like, this is awesome. When I went out there, they met me there, Kilo, my good friend, and Wayne, we met out there, and I said, hey, I don't even know if these guys even know who the hell I am,
Right.
And I meet them out there during the day, and I said, my name's Aaron Camaro. I've been ring announcing for Saw. That's kind of dried up on me, and I am looking for new opportunities. And they were like, you want to work here? And I was like, yeah. They're like, okay, what do you want to get paid? And I probably aimed way too low, but I was like, hey, you're a mile from the house, and I want to stay involved in this stuff. And so, yeah, that was a little bit in between Saw and Main Event, because I needed something to do, and they were a mile from the house. So was that? No, the fat suit time would have been later, right?
Yeah, the fat suit
boss.
So here's what happened. Okay, so I remember us connecting, and you were like, hey, man, I got this idea. I'm really trying to get the book at this place called HWA. I really have some cool ideas, and I want to help them out,
They needed the help. They needed it.
And so Becker was there, Andrew Becker, and I believe Chad Hyatt was there. And Andrew was, of course, behind the camera. He was always the cameraman. And I remember we had one of their guys dressing up as a female. I don't know if that was his normal gimmick or what.
Yeah, no. That was something I had created.
He was hot about that. He didn't like that. I remember.
Me and the wife, that was us. Yeah. I brought him over to the house one day, and I was like, dude, you want to be a heel? Let's make you a heel. Yeah. And made him fucking beautiful. He was a beautiful woman. My wife and his girlfriend did his makeup. Yeah. My wife made him this frilly jacket. I mean, it was good to go. And then he was like, I can't do this. And I was like, what do you mean you can't do it? And he was like, I just can't do it. The boys in the back will make fun of me. Right. And I was like, yeah, but you can use this to elevate yourself, and they just, it's tough sometimes. I'm an idea guy, I always have been, sure. and so it's always difficult when you got this like brilliant thing and you know exactly where you want it to go. And then you got to try to find somebody else to do it because dude pussed out, at the last minute.
Right. And I remember you saying,
gorgeous.
Yeah, it was perfect. So I remember you saying, Jimmy, you are a representative from CWTV. Okay. That is your job. I'm bringing you here to tell them that I can get TV for them, and you are going to be the representative for the CW. So I am introducing myself as Jimmy Street, the CW representative. If I would have had time, I would have made up business cards. You know what I'm saying?
And I go there with my
suit. I go there with my suit, and I'm introducing myself to everyone, shaking their hands because that's what I'd learned to do. And it's so funny because everyone thought we worked the whole locker room. But the funniest part, Okay, the funniest part, we obviously go out to the ring. I remember I was out there and little cousin Condry was like 10 or, I mean, he was very young at
he was
that
a little
time.
kid.
Kid, like 10 years old, and he was carrying a baseball bat with his dad. And I said, this little kid's going to ping me with this baseball bat. I can tell he's got that look in his eyes. And it's so funny. We became friends later, and I even ended up managing him and all that. But it's a cool story with him. But,
and he never lost that look in his eye.
Never did. I'm going to kill you, and I love that.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I introduced myself. There's guys coming around like, so you really with CW? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like lying out of my. And so anyway, so I just remember, us going around. I'm introducing myself as the CW TV guy. And there was guys like, man, I know you, man. We've worked together over somewhere. And I'm like, I know we've never worked. And I'd never worked with them. So that wasn't a lie, And I just remember it was the first time I met Gordon Dunaway. I met lots of people there, but that was the first time I ever met most of the wrestlers that were there. And then you, of course, come back to me at the Great Escape, and that's what leads us to the main event story. But that was I
don't even remember that, and you make me feel terrible. What the hell was I doing?
I was relying on
you work out there with Reno Riggins and Krull and Paul Adams for a year, and look what they turn you into.
Hey,
I'm bringing fake CW representatives to the show to try to get the book.
I mean, dude, tell me that's not a great story, Jared. That's a good story, man.
That's awesome.
Story, man. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So obviously that never happened. Nothing came of that. And then eventually you meet Mike Porter or you get to main event. So lead us to that now.
All right, so then, there was that little stint in between because I went from Saw, which Saw was really good, and they would have their one Friday night. It would be TJ's crew, which would be like all local guys, and the following week would be the TV taping. So it was on and off every other Friday.
Right.
And it got to the point where somebody said to me, hey, get a haircut, lose the bandana, lose the glasses, get rid of this shiny jacket. And get yourself a suit and tie and black pants, black jacket. They just wanted to make me into like a generic ring announcer. I struggled over that. I really struggled over that because it was like a whole week. I go right back home to the wife, go, what am I going to do? I feel like what I'm doing is working, and the whole thing that I always imagined out of being the ring announcer was to take it, like I loved Borash because he would involve people, he would talk to people, specific people in the crowd. Hey, what'd you think of that? And I love that. And then I love the booming voice of like a Dave Penzer or a Howard Finkel because they would make whatever you're seeing right now the most important thing in the world. But then I thought, I got to put a little of my own personality in here too. So, what if you took those things and mixed them up with Paul Stanley and David Lee Roth? What would you come up with? And that's what I came up with. And I felt like it was working.
Yeah.
And so it was like, do it or, what choice do I have? And at the time when they told it to me, it was after a show that had just gone really good. And they said, oh, hey, by the way, I want to tell you got to do this. I'm like,
wow. And they were probably just expecting you to just say, okay, sure, we'll do that. I want to, and that would have killed you though, man, because dude, your original, I mean, like to know what it led you to down the line, which we're going to get to, that would have neutered you from the start, man. That would have, that could have changed everything for you.
And so instead of going, okay, yep, I'm coming along with you to the next level, what I did was made a well-worded email and was like, look, if I'm not what you're looking for, then you should probably go find what it is you're looking for. But I feel like what I'm doing is pretty good and I don't want to change it. So, I understand if you want to move on with somebody else. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do because Saw was the only place that ever gave me an opportunity. And I loved it out there. I loved working with TJ, especially. So what ends up happening is I start working off weeks. I only start working the Fridays that it's just TJ's crew. And then eventually we move out to Laverne, and that makes it a little tougher to get all the way out to Millersville on a Friday night. And so I start doing the HWA thing, which, people have heard stories about outlaw promotions. I have never, ever worked for a more outlaw promotion than HWA. And you know what? Looking back on it now, that's a compliment. Those guys were doing something way different than what everybody else was doing. And for them, some nights it worked. Some nights I'd walk out there and there'd be 3 people in the crowd.
Yeah.
I'd turn off the microphone, walk over to those 3 people and be like, whoa, you 3 are in for a hell of a show tonight.
Yeah. Dude,
everything I imagine is going to happen right over here in your vicinity. But then it was Jason James who reached out to me.
Okay.
And said, hey man, I heard you're done with Saw and you're out there at HWA. Do you want an opportunity to do some commentary? And that's really what I wanted. Before Saw, I was pushing for that. I would watch that Dan Masters, God rest his soul, and he would do the Mean Gene interview style thing, interviews so good.
Right.
And I'd look at him and go, that's something right there. I could kind of mimic that. So I took a little Dan Masters inside me and wanted to do some of that, but whenever Dan Masters was in town, obviously he's the one doing it. And then, but it seemed like if he wasn't there, then nobody was doing it. And so then I said to Kroll one time, man, I'd really love an opportunity to do some interviews, or do some commentary. But they had a good commentary team. They had that Doogie out there, and Reno was calling the matches, and they were good.
Right.
So there was really no place for me to go from there. But then when Jason James came around and said, hey, you want a shot to do some commentary? I was like, yes, please. And so that's where I met Mike Porter.
Okay.
And in the in-between time, I think I did a little bit with USWO. Maybe it was NWA Cyber Slam in the bottom of the stadium
Okay.
But that led to NWA. And then from there, I'm doing commentary. I'm doing some ring announcing. I don't even really remember who was booking at that time, but it wasn't too long after I got there that Bill Behrens showed up, and my whole wrestling career changed at that moment.
Yeah. That's all. That was a huge pivotal point for you, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the legendary NWA promoter when NWA still was NWA, and, Wild Side, Cornelia, Georgia. I mean, he's done so many incredible AJ Styles. I mean, we could just name a majority of the TNA roster, Wolfie D, so many other people got to work there, and Luke Hawks. I mean, some incredible people. Bill knew what he was doing. You know what I mean? And
100%. Like when he showed up, everything changed. It went from being just another one of these shows to, okay, we're going to start telling some stories. We're going to start doing some, filming, and it just changed overnight. So when he took me, and they were calling him Jeremy Arnold at the time, I mean, the world knows him as the Wicked Nemesis,
right? And
put us together. Like, we shake hands. Hey, it's nice to meet you. All right, red camera's on. Tell us about what's happening tonight. And he and I were just electric together, so like we would nail it like the first time on the first take, and Bill was like, I'll be damned, that was really good. And we go, awesome, and then we go do whatever. And then come time for the call in the matches, he and I would just hit off each other so good. And I mean, I would just follow Bill Behrens around. I would just be his shadow. If he was up in the locker room filming something, I'm there. I'm watching how he directs them and gets out of them what he needs perfectly. He just has a way of explaining things that anybody can understand, and getting exactly out of the performers what he's expecting to be able to tell these amazing stories. And it was just the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because I learned so much, just following Bill Behrens around. And so eventually the Bill Behrens era at NWA Main Event comes to an end. And so then, like, the next week, it's just one of the workers is booking the show. And it's like, what did we do last week? Well, we did this, well, let's do that. You're going to work with him. You're going to work with him. And me and my buddies are going to work the main event.
Right.
And it's like, I would stand there, and now, everybody left with Bill Behrens, and now we're left with this skeleton crew that were not major players when Bill Behrens was running things.
Right.
And so then it's like, okay, should we try to save this? No, nobody was interested in that. It was just like, whatever. And to go through and learn and see how good it was when Bill Behrens was running Main Event. I mean, we started out on Veritas in Nashville, and then we moved over to Trinity Lane, and man, it was unbelievable to watch the crowd go from when Bill Behrens starts, and we're probably at maybe 50 people in the crowd. And then the next week it's 100, and the next week it's 150, and the next week it's 200, and the next week it's 300, and it's like we're packing these places out based off these stories that Bill's telling, because every week he would leave them with the hook of, we have to come back next week. Otherwise, we're not going to know what happens.
Right.
And I was like, that's what's up right there. So then when Bill leaves, like I said, it just kind of falls down. And now the crowd starts dying. And I'm seeing it. And I'm in inner turmoil because I knew I was there before. I knew how good it was, you know, and how this little change made such a huge, terrible, terrible impact on it. What happens is a guy named Max Vitelli from New York City comes down, and he wants to run a all women's wrestling show. It was awesome. We had a great weekend that weekend. Had like 3 different shows. I think I did one for HWA, did the women's show, and did an NWA main event show. It was like the wrestling weekend.
Nice.
And the first thing Max Vitelli did was got a room upstairs. And I go, I've never been in this room. What is this? Well, it's a room with a desk sitting in it. So he's sitting at the desk and goes, you know, send in so-and-so and send in so-and-so. And he would talk to them about what they were going to do that night and be like, great, you got it? Good. And the next one, send them in. You know, so they would all come to Max Vitelli in that room. And we drew pretty good for that, you know. And so I go to Porter because the next week it's back down to 50 people. And I go to Porter, I go, hey, man, you know, I've been here for a while now. You know, I'm a loyal, you know, worker for you. And, you know, we had it so good when Bill Behrens was here. And I really, really did my best to learn everything I could learn off Bill Behrens. You know, if you would consider to give me an opportunity to write your show, I don't want nothing to do with the money. I don't want to be, you know, the technical booker where I'm bringing guys in and firing guys. You give me the pieces and I'll put together the show. And it took a minute of talking him into it because he's like, you've never done nothing like that before. I was like, it's true. I said, but I went to college, you know.
Yeah.
Give me an opportunity. And eventually he gave in and let me do it. And little by little, like the first thing I did was like, okay, who is my roster and what do I have now? You know, and these are basically what I'm given. So I have no choice in the matter of who I got to use. So I got to find a way to use everybody because, I mean, he's gone now, but anybody that's ever known or worked for Mike Porter, he wasn't known as a guy that would pay a lot.
No, not a bit.
So my roster that I worked with was a real mix. You had, you know, some guys that were just so talented.
Yeah.
And then the other half of the card that really needed some work. Yeah. But to me, the most important thing to mask, you know, any deficiencies in the show was to build characters and to have surprises and to tell stories that people could sink their teeth into. And little by little, we built that back up. And that's when I saw Jimmy Street down at the Great Escape. And I was like, hey, man, we got an opportunity to do something real cool here. Yeah, I got a guy. He needs a mouthpiece.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know what's funny is because I think at that point I'm like, well, you know, I have done this character, Prince Omar Al-Kazan. I remember creating it with my mentor, the guy who brought me in the business, Ken Still, rest in peace, love you, big bro. But we sat and we made up. We were like, okay, so Saudi gimmick, that's going to get heat immediately. So let's think of a name. And I go through all the names and I search Wikipedia and I'm like, what is the most common last name in Saudi Arabia, you know, or whatever. And we came up with Al-Kazan. And then he was like, you know, I always liked, what was it, Muammar Gaddafi, right? And he was like, what if you did Omar Al-Kazan? And it wouldn't be Muammar, you know, but it would be Omar. And I'm like, I love that. And then we could be a prince because who are the kings and princes of Saudi Arabia? Who knows? But we know there's some over there. And that's how Prince Omar Al-Kazan was created, was on the phone. And then I would travel and do the gimmick, and the gimmick would get better, you know, with the better stuff that I would buy and stuff. But yeah, man. So I meet you and I say, hey, I've got this thing. And you're like, well, I need somebody. And I'm like, ooh, I want to be somebody.
Yeah. And honestly, man, I saw it in you. I knew from the conversations we had just in the store, whether it be about G.I. Joe or rock and roll or wrestling, I saw it in you. I knew you could do it immediately. And so when you came and said, you know, I've actually got a little bit of experience doing this thing, I was like, oh yeah, you need to meet me over here on Thursday night because we're going to do something cool. And one of my favorite things that I ever booked still to this day that always stands out in my memory was how we brought you in.
Yeah.
Like, because I thought, well, you know, you bring him through the curtain, he comes down the ring, gets the microphone, gets in the ring, introduces himself. That's boring. You know, that's boring. That's not going to cut it. You know, we got to do something special with this Prince Omar Al-Kazan. So tell the story about how you made your debut.
Oh, man. So I remember, you know, we were sitting up in the room and you were like, I'm going to be putting you with this guy, Seven. He's going to be coming in from Wisconsin. TNA is going to be running here again, and he's wanting to kind of get some experience and maybe possibly get a step up to TNA like a lot of the other guys had done. And so you were like, but he's not here this week, but I want to introduce you. And you tell me, you're like, man, I'm going to put you, I think we should put you in the crowd in the seat by ringside. And I'm already thinking, yeah, this is cool. And then you're like, we'll put it, and somebody says, put him beside Chicken Hat, or you said it first and they said, yes, that's awesome. Yeah. And so you put me beside Chicken Hat, which Jared has heard stories of Chicken Hat. Chicken Hat was the wildest, awesomest pro wrestling
super fan.
Yeah, super fan. Was at anything, if it was at the Municipal Bridgestone, or if it was at the fairgrounds, or if it was on Trinity Lane for Mike Porter. If Chicken Hat wasn't there, I don't even know if you could call yourself a real wrestling show in that area.
No way.
You know what I mean? And he's sitting there and he's looking at me. And anyway, so I come out there and I just do walk up beside him, and there's a seat.
The first thing you did was bought a ticket.
Right, exactly. Yes.
That was and you had a bodyguard that night. So I said, I don't want you to come in through the curtain boring style. I want you to come in partway through the show during this match, buy a ticket. Your security guard stands by the door. You come in. We've already got the chair all set up right next to Chicken Hat. You sit down next to him. And what I want you to do is say, what is this? You know? And see what he says, you know, and just kind of carry on a conversation about him, and put over the fact that you are a rich man from overseas and you know fighters, you know. And I even remember saying to you, don't say wrestling, say fighters. And I always remember you told me the story back, and you'd say, you know, so I said to him, you know, I am from Saudi Arabia, and what is this, you know? And he'd say, well, this is professional wrestling.
Yes.
And we're like, oh, so these men, they fight for money, you know? Yeah, they fight for money, and they fight for championship belts, you know? And so the beauty of the whole thing was you carry on this conversation with Chicken Hat, and you're legit, you know, you're asking questions. And then at the end, you're like, I know fighters. I have fighters. I could bring in a fighter for you, make some real money. Yeah. And off you go. Yeah, you go out the door and you leave. This is right before intermission, all according to my plan. So at intermission, I slide outside. And what happens outside, where everybody gathers at intermission? They're all circled around Chicken Hat Charles. Who was that? What was he talking to you about? And Charles is like, I don't really know who he is. He wants to bring fighters in here into NWA Main Event, he said. It was crazy, you know? That's awesome. And the people, and it's like, that's beautiful, because I don't need to tell Omar Al-Kazan's story. Omar Al-Kazan can tell it to Chicken Hat, and Chicken Hat can tell it to the people, and all of a sudden, it's real.
Right. Yeah. Jared, tell me that wouldn't work on TV right now. I mean, it may not because of the logistics of everything, but seriously, that kind of setup is huge, man. And
it's a great setup. I mean, it's, you know, you got the plant and everything like that. And, I mean, I always think back when I think of a plant of like Earthquake in the crowd with Jimmy Hart, like coming down to sit on the back and everything. So any kind of plant like that can feel super real. Yeah. And you know,
and the beautiful thing about it was we didn't even have to use a plant. We used Chicken Hat Charles, and it became real.
Exactly, because it was real to Charles, you know.
So then it became real to everybody else that circled around him and said, "What was that?" And so then the next week, when you come out with Seven, their minds are blown, because whatever just had happened out there that was real is really happening in the ring. As a writer, I've never called myself a booker because I never want to deal with the money.
Right.
But as a writer for a wrestling show, your goal is to make it as real as possible. I mean, here we are in 2024. Everybody knows what professional wrestling is. Now, your job, if you're a promoter or you're a writer or you're a booker, your job is to make people sit in those seats and forget all that shit for 2 hours.
Right.
And be totally invested. And the more real you can make it, the easier that becomes. You know, you're doing your fans a favor by making it easy for them to buy in.
Amen.
And I've always stood by that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too.
This is your rock star ring announcer, Aaron Camaro. I'm a man who believes the two greatest art forms ever created are professional wrestling and heavy rock music. So when I'm not hosting the best parties that also happen to be live professional wrestling shows, I'm hosting the Decibel Geek podcast. Decibel Geek is a weekly podcast that features discussions of all things rock. We're talking the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Black Sabbath, Kiss, Ozzy, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Alice in Chains, Pantera, and everything in between. Plus, we'll turn you on to new bands from today that have the same spirit and style that the legends do. Decibel Geek is hosted by myself along with Rockin' Pod founder Chris Sinzak, and each week you'll get interviews with famous musicians and industry insiders along with informative, entertaining, humorous, and insightful discussions, and most importantly, a passion for the music. So if you love to rock out as much as I do, then this is your invitation to the greatest rock and roll party in all of podcasting. It's Decibel Geek, and it's available right now on all major podcast platforms. Oh yeah.
And then the next week, I think 7 is there. And by the way, let me step back. My bodyguard that night he's a great musician. He has a great band. They're called Justin Webb and the Noise. Justin was a friend of an ex-girlfriend of mine, and man, great guy. I actually saw him at the Columbia Fan Fest reunion that Shane Morton puts on. He came by and didn't even know I was going to be there. And yeah, I didn't even get to really talk to him, but he emailed me and said, "Hey man, it was good to see that you're still doing something." And I'm like, "Yeah, bro, that was awesome. I wish you'd have said hey." But anyway, that was my initial bodyguard. And then 7 came in, and obviously that eliminated any need for a bodyguard. And I didn't know Jermaine at all. I love 7. I got major love for 7. And I was like, my God, this guy's like a Greek god, man. He looks like he looks real. You know what I'm saying? And that's another Wisconsin boy, you know, but you know.
Yeah, go Pack, go.
And honestly, that made the package so much better to me, because you could have put me with anybody. You could have. It would have been fine. But to put me with 7, who was already kind of feature attraction that you were going to be using, and to bring him in and then have me as it was just perfect, because he fit that fighter role too, you know?
Right, yeah. And he was a huge part of what I had planned going forward, because going forward, it was all about 7. It was all about Nick Iggy. It was all about Drew Haskins.
Right.
And, you know, the funny thing about all that was, like, at the time when this all happened, like I said, you know, I don't have any say on who the players are. You know, I just got to make it happen with whatever I'm given. And Mike Porter comes to me one day and goes, you know, we've been using Nick Iggy, and this was before he was part of the great tag team, and he was still pretty young in the business.
Yeah.
And he says to me, you know, we're bringing in Nick Iggy, and we want to make him NWA Mid-America heavyweight champion. And I say, hey, that's great. You know, I love Iggy. He's awesome. You know, we could definitely do that. And I said, my only problem with that is Nick Iggy is working here, and he'll be our NWA Main Event champion. Yeah. But tomorrow night, right at like a mile or two up the road,
right,
he's going to be mid-card, losing, you know. Please, you know, if you're going to do this, talk to Tony Falk and see if you can get him elevated over there, because otherwise, you know, it's not going to work. And, you know, it's funny. In my time of doing stuff like this, I've had plenty of run-ins with the old school guys. So Porter was like, well, what's that matter? And I was like, from a storytelling point of view and a perception is reality point of view, that means a lot.
Yeah.
And so then he's like, fine, I'll talk to Tony. You know, there was a lot of things like,
other.
right. Yeah. But there had to be something, you know, to make it worthwhile.
Right.
But in the meantime, the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight Champion is Wild Thing Will Owens. And Will Owens is back down in Alabama and hasn't been back in like a year. And the title belt is just sitting in Porter's house.
Right.
And it's like, we have to figure out a way to bring him back to make this happen, you know? And so there was a whole lot of there was a lot of turmoil in between, like getting to that spot, you know, to where we could get Will back. So it's a lot of number one contenders matches, and, you know, this guy faces that guy's mystery opponent. And that was a struggle as a writer to really stretch that out to the point where we could actually get Will Owens back in Nashville to drop that title so we could start using it again. But all the credit in the world to Will Owens, because he came back with his leg in a huge old brace, and made it work, you know. And I knew Will Owens from the Bill Behrens days. I'm a huge fan of that guy.
That's cool.
One of the greatest lessons I ever learned in pro wrestling one night was during Bill Behrens' era, and he was like, "Has anybody bled here yet?" And I was like, "Oh man, not for a long, long time, but I was hoping we were kind of saving that for something special." You know, he's like, "Well, tonight somebody's going to bleed." And it was a match between Boogie Woogie Boy and Wild Thing Will Owens.
Nice.
And Wild Thing, they don't do nothing. Like half of the match is them on the outside of the ring.
Right.
There's Will on the outside of the ring jacking his jaws to the fans, to Boogie Woogie Boy.
Right.
And then when they finally get in, they probably work for maybe 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then Boogie Woogie Boy gets busted open, and Will Owens, on his way back to the locker room. We help Boogie Woogie Boy up. We get him to the locker room, and I go, holy shit, you know? These guys literally work 3 minutes and have this place on their feet.
Yes.
This is beautiful. This is what it's all about right here.
Right.
And so I go back up to the locker room, and I'm like, you guys, holy shit, you know? And they're like, yeah, how do you like that, young guys? And they're kind of giving it to the young dudes that are out there killing themselves in the ring. And they really didn't do nothing, probably getting paid way more than the dude that did the 350 splash onto the, you know, table on the floor.
Right.
And the security guard comes and he goes, hey, Aaron, there's a problem. I go, what's the problem? He goes, they're not leaving. I go, who's not leaving? He goes, the people, the fans, they're not leaving. You know, they want to know that Boogie Woogie Boy's okay. And I go, oh, shit, you know, and now I'm in the zone after seeing that. So I say, get me that microphone. So I get the microphone. I go back out. The show's over. People are still out in the crowd. They're pissed. Yeah. I get in the ring. I say, hey, listen, everybody. I just want to give you guys an update. Wild Thing Will Owens is left the building. He's halfway back to Alabama by now. Boogie Woogie Boy has been taken to a local hospital. I don't know if he's going to need stitches. He's in rough shape, but he wanted me to tell you that he will be back next week, and he will be looking for revenge, and he sure hopes that he can count on all of you to be here with him. And they cheered, and out the door they went. And I walked back in that locker room, and them guys were like, hell yeah, dude. That's
how you do it. That's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that's just magic. That's just magic. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, and I mean, those guys, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think Drew took the title off of Will. Am I right? And then I know Seven and Drew hooked up for a bit. Am I wrong? Tell me how it was.
No.
Right.
Okay, so Iggy takes the title off of Will Owens as planned.
Got it.
In a huge emotional thing. Like, Iggy has clawed and fought his way to this opportunity for so long at this point. When it finally happens, Iggy gets behind Will, schoolboys him 1, 2, 3. That place erupted because it had been months leading up to this thing. Just trying to get, you know, what the fans didn't know was we're trying to figure out how to get Will Owens back here to legitimately drop the title, because I'm telling Porter, you know, just to strip him, it's kind of cheap, you know. I'd really like to see some conclusion to this, you know. And so we, after months, finally find a way to get him back. And it's just a quick thing, and I'm sure awesome payday for Will Owens, you know, and which is good. He deserves every payday he gets.
Right.
And Iggy wins the title after battling with Seven and Drew, all three of them, the triangle of entertainment in NWA Main Event. It became all about those guys.
Yeah, right.
And then Iggy finally wins it. The title you're thinking of that Drew won, I want to say, if I remember correctly, was the NWA Southern Heavyweight title, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You want to hear a crazy story.
Of course.
Right. So, I've always got Porter on my ass about stuff all the time. And so this is that big show where they pulled in all those champions from all over the place. They had the guy from Texas, the little superhero dude, put his title on the line. We had our titles on the line, and Ace Rockwell comes up wearing that Southern Heavyweight Championship. And, I know that none of the major titles are changing.
Right.
That's just the rule that's been given to me. Hey, have them do whatever, but none of the belts change hands. So, there were certain guys that, and I'm Aaron Camaro, so I got no business telling you, go into a headlock and then do this and then do that. I'm never going to tell you what to do in the match. I'll tell you how it needs to end, or maybe something cool that needs to happen somewhere in the middle, but I'm not going to sit down and work with you through the entire match. You guys are professional wrestlers. You know what you're doing, for the most part. Drew Haskins was always one of them guys. No matter who he was working with, I'd go, here's what we're doing. Here's how it needs to go. You listen to Drew and work it out.
Right.
So that night I go to them guys and I go, the two guys in the locker room that I don't have to say a word to. I said, you guys know how it's going to end. I don't care how you do it, because between the two of you, it's going to be amazing. And Ace Rockwell says to me, right, that sounds good. I'm dropping the title, right? And I go, that's funny. And he goes, no, seriously, I'd really like to drop this title tonight if you don't mind. And I go, hey, man, you're going to get me in some serious trouble. I said, tell you what, whatever you guys work out, make it look like an accident. And God rest Mike Porter, he's long dead, but I would not want to tell that story while he was still alive, because I would have been immediately fired.
Right.
But that's what they did. Ace Rockwell decided, against whatever the NWA actually was at that time, that he was going to drop the title that night to Drew Haskins. And then Drew was able to travel around with that title quite a bit.
Right.
So that worked out good for him. Not so good for NWA Main Event, but it worked out great for him.
Right. That was that. Thank you for clearing that up, because you're right. Now I can remember it perfectly. I can remember the two titles, but it's funny because I was remembering the big match with Drew and Seven, where it was like, but they went hardcore with it. It was like a Texas death match almost, and they're throwing trash everywhere. And man, that was a crazy match. I remember that one forever. The funniest part of that match actually happened before, because Seven did the Brock Lesnar, the Sid thing, where he would stand flat-footed and jump directly up on top of the apron. And 99% of the time, Jermaine lands that every time. But he hadn't done that yet, right? Okay, he hadn't done that. He was like, watch this. And I'm like, okay. And he does it, and he doesn't land it. He falls back. And he comes back on his feet. He doesn't go to the butt on the floor. He comes back on his feet, and he looks so angry. And I said, use that. And he did. And he goes in and totally destroys Drew for the first part of it. It was great. Yeah. It kind of made sense, making, the best of what you can, even though I'm sure it was a little embarrassing for Jermaine. But
tell me, Jimmy, indulge us. Tell us the story about Seven versus the family.
This is so incredible. Okay, so these guys, the Juggalos, right? Okay, so they would have probably never been booked on many shows in the area. They were pretty green, good guys. Oh, yeah. Right, good guys.
Yeah, real good guys.
And I mean, I'll honestly say that they actually told me, I learned a lot about the Juggalo people, and I actually think I like the Juggalo people. You know what I'm saying? I think there's some good people in that. They live outside of the law sometimes, but whatever. But anyway, these guys, they're doing the ICP gimmick and, kind of like Kroll, the Extreme Clown Posse deal, but this was their own thing. And so, Aaron was throwing these guys a bone, God bless them. They had a manager, and I remember, we do these these vignettes leading up to this, and it's about to be Seven versus these guys, and it's going to be
I don't feel like they probably felt like I was throwing them a bone after the match was over.
No, they didn't. Seven's got the folding chair set directly like you could just sit right into it. He choke slams one of them directly onto the sitting chair and bends it down completely.
Yeah,
so he literally drove that guy through a metal chair. And he ends up pinning them 1-2 on top of each other, and
all three of them stacked on top of each other.
That's right. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you're right. And man, he just beat the crap out of them, and it was just like, holy cow! These guys, I felt so bad for them after, but they earned their stripes in that match. After that,
they did.
Those guys were wrestlers. After that, you know what I'm saying? They earned
100%. And like I said, with Porter, I had half the roster that was really damn good. I didn't have to barely worry about, just tell them where we're going.
Right.
And then the other ones that you really had to work with. And I would tell those guys, because other dudes in the locker room would be like, why you got them booked here? They're green. They don't know what the hell they're doing. And I'd say, hey, you know what? I don't got a say in that, but we're going to do the best with them what we can. And I would tell them, you know what, guys, you're going to lose a lot of matches. You're going to lose a lot of matches, but someday, this is my biggest NWA main event regret, and I've got a few. Someday, when you get that victory, it's going to be a big deal, but you got to lose a lot first before you get there.
Right.
And so I would use them, but they'd never win. They'd never win. Right. They were always there to put somebody else over, and at that time, I needed to show the people just what a huge threat Seven was. Right. And I could think of no better way than him destroying all three of those guys at once.
Amen.
And it did a lot for both of them. It reinforced the fact that Seven is probably the most dangerous man on the roster.
Right.
And two, it showed that these guys, their limited abilities, they've got the hearts to really, they're going to do it. They know what's going to happen to them, but they're going to try anyway. Right. And that built them even more as just sympathy. People yearning to see them win, finally. Right. And my time with NWA Main Event kind of dried up before I ever got to see that through, as well as a bunch of other things that I had planned. But that was one that I really wish I could have gave them guys their big win.
Yeah.
Because they earned it. They definitely earned it that night. That shit's on YouTube.
Yeah, it is. It is great. And I actually, I remember talking to the guy, Matt, who did the video work for us. I remember bringing him in because he was a customer at The Great Escape. And I was like, man, there's no pay, but you'll get to build this resume of wrestling if you want to do it. And he came in and did it, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we've got a full NWA main event show planned in the future where we're going to have hopefully Seven and Drew Haskins, Nick Iggy, Kevin Weatherby, Larry Cooter, Aaron, yourself. I mean, we're going to have all kinds of people on it.
So tell us about, when you were working for Porter, some of the ideas that you didn't get to do.
I can tell you this. There was a handful of guys that I really wanted to bring in because I kind of felt like the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight Championship was a big star of the show in itself. Because if you look back on the lineage of that title,
yeah,
I mean, Macho Man Randy Savage held that title at one time, and Dutch Mantell had that title at one time. So there is a huge lineage that goes back years with that belt.
Yeah,
and so I never, ever missed an opportunity to put over the belt.
Yeah,
because it was huge. And so then, at that point, I start looking at guys that have held the belt before and who are still out there doing stuff. I wanted to bring in Lee Condrey at one point, and the idea with Lee Condrey was going to be he was going to be the lawman, Lee Condrey.
Nice.
And he was going to be there fighting for justice. And when something, BS was going down on the ring, he was the one you could count on to run out and help out no matter what was going on. And I had an idea for him for that. I wanted to bring in JT Quest. He was a former champion that just had charisma for miles. I knew people were going to love it no matter what role I brought him back in, that people were going to love to see him there. And I really, really wanted to bring those two guys in. And Porter said to me, well, who's going to pay him? You? I said, I ain't making no money doing this, you know.
Right. Come on, dude. Are you kidding me?
that was kind of the end of that, you know, because I really wanted to bring those guys. I had big plans for those two guys, and the fact that they were former champions really added more legitimacy to that belt, because here you got two former champions back in the mix, you know, and you could always say former NWA Mid-America Heavyweight Champion JT Quest or Lawman Lee Condrey. Yeah. And those things never came to fruition. Man. I had a storyline for Hammerjack at one time, because I like Hammerjack. I've always liked Hammerjack.
Amen.
And I had a story for him at one time that I thought was just out of this world. It was going to be so good. And I went to Mike Porter and I said, hey, check out this story. And I tell it to him, and he goes, that sounds really good. He goes, who do you got in mind for it? And I was like, I think Hammerjack would be perfect for it. And he was like, hell no.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? You know, you don't think Hammerjack would be great in that role in this, you know, telling that story? He goes, let me tell you this. If you ever bring up that guy's name again to me for anything you've got in mind, you can just consider yourself fired. And Porter would say stuff like that to me all the time. I say, but why? He goes, you want to bring a cancer into your locker room? I said, no. He goes, well, that's exactly what you'd be doing. And I go, okay, boss, you know, all right, maybe I'll use somebody else for that spot. And so those were three guys that I really wanted to bring in, that I thought, you know, we can do something really special here and the fans will get behind it, that I never had the opportunity to work with.
Man, all three of those guys would have added so much ability and talent to that locker room too, man, you know,
and legitimacy,
absolute
and knowledge, and knowledge, you know, that's always what I wanted to kind of get to the point where I don't have to tell anybody, you know, really too much, you know, that these guys are so professional, because I got so used to working with Drew Haskins and Nick Iggy and Seven and you and the top guys at that time. And I mean, you can't forget the X Division. I'll never forget that. I was at Porter's house one time, and I just asked him out of the blue, I was like, you got any other titles? And he was like, well, I mean, I got that NWA Mid-America X Division title in there in the closet. And I was like, what? You know, and he's like, yeah. So I go dig it out of there, and I go, what the, you know, it's in a bag. And I pull it out. It's beautiful. It's just like the, you know, the TNA belt, but it's got a black X and it says Mid-America on it.
Right.
And I said, oh man, why didn't you tell me you had this? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, can I use it? And he was like, yeah, I don't care. And so here's another funny story. I should save some of this stuff for when we do our NWA main event talk, because I got some good stories, but I'll be spoiling a lot for that next one.
Well, you know, like we can say that one of the greatest matches you ever booked ever or wrote was that multiple man. I can't remember how many were in it for the title. I know Kevin Weatherby was in it. I know a few other guys, Jamie Ferrari, maybe LBK, maybe, you know, but some of these guys, and you did it was a
Stephen
ladder
Green.
match. It was Stephen Green. Thank you. And it was for
LBK.
LBK. And I remember that was one of the greatest matches that was ever in that building. They put on a hell of a match, man. I mean,
all right,
seriously.
You're going to make me spoil it. I have never been more scared in my life than when that match was going on. And I learned a huge lesson as somebody who's trying to create creative for a show. You figure out how you're going to do it before you announce it. So I announced that there's going to be a ladder match for the X Division champion. First time in many years that we're going to have X Division champion here. And I said, there's going to be a ladder match, you know? So then after the show, Mike Porter says to me, so, you know, it's a ladder match tonight, huh? I said, yes, sir. You know, it's going to be awesome. And he goes, how are you going to hang it? And I go, I don't know. So there's two lighting rigs on each side of the ring.
Right.
And so when it comes down to it, the only way we can do it is to hang a rope from this side and hang a rope from this side. And when I got JT Gibson, the ring announcer, because I couldn't ring announce and, you know, put the show together at the same time, I got JT Gibson up there on the ladder, and he's hanging it. And when he's doing it, the light rigs are moving. And I go, oh, this ain't good. And he goes, nah, they move, but I don't think they're going to come down.
Yeah.
And I go, let me climb up there, and I pull around on the belt a little bit, and it's moving the lights, and I go, oh man, I just don't like that. But at this point, you know, the show is in an hour. We ain't got no choice.
Right.
So we leave it up there on the ropes, and before the match, I go to those guys, I go, listen, all the action can happen wherever. But when it comes down to it, and I believe it was Stephen Green that won the belt that night.
I think so.
Stephen Green is the one that climbs up there. Nobody else fight. You don't touch the belt. Just don't touch the belt until Stephen, you gently take it off there.
Yeah.
And I'm standing back there, I'm watching these guys, and their fingertips are touching the belt, and those lights are moving, and there's people underneath the lights. And I'm back there, I'm praying to God, literally praying to God, please, Lord, please, I don't ask much. Please don't let these lights fall on these people.
Right.
And when the match was over, Stephen Green comes down with the belt, man.
Yeah, I know.
I've never been so scared in my life. And I learned a huge lesson that night.
Oh, dude, it was awesome. I remember it being, because we were all sitting there watching it through the drapes there on that stage in that building on Trinity Lane. We're all watching it. And I'm like, my God, this is an incredible match. I'm like really into this match right now. These guys are killing themselves. But yeah, we'll talk about more main event, because we could talk so much more right now. But I want to get to the next step. And obviously this is going to lead to another part of main event, but we'll let you tell it. Basically, there's this hot new promotion coming to town. One of what I would say is arguably one of the most unfortunate missed opportunities for what could be still an incredible promotion running today. So talk about when you first started hearing of Crossfire coming to town, Aaron.
So at this time, I guess I must have still been doing a little something with Saw, because Marcus Pastorius and Hammerjack come to me and they say, what are you doing after the show? And I said, I don't know, going home with my wife, and they're like, well, you want to have a beer? And I was like, yeah, I could probably have a beer too, but I can't stay out all night. And so we meet over by Opry Mills at the scoreboard, and they kind of lay out to me what they got in mind. And they said, you got to be the voice of Crossfire. And at that point, it wasn't even, I take that back, because it wasn't even Crossfire then. It was just the tribute to the fairgrounds shows.
Right.
And they said, we really want, you got to be the announcer for this. You're the guy, and I say, you don't got to tell me twice, I think back to elbowing my brother during that TNA show and looking at him and going, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to be in the ring in this fairgrounds with this place packed, man. I'm going to do it.
That's so awesome.
And that provided the opportunity. And I had such a hard on for working the fairgrounds because I'd never worked there before.
Yeah.
And so I go to Porter and I say, hey, man, there's a show coming up. It doesn't interfere with anything I'm doing with you. It's just kind of a one-off thing. I've always really wanted to work the fairgrounds, and, I'm going to be doing that night. And he's like, oh, really? Because how Porter was about people working for other promotions. And I go, yeah, but it's just a one-time thing. I'm giving you plenty of heads up. It's weeks away. I just want to let you know. I was being respectful to him, And so he comes back to me. He goes, this is like a week or two later now. And he goes, hey, Aaron, you grew up in Wisconsin, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, big fan of AWA, right? I said, yeah. He goes, well, it's funny because me and Bert have teamed up and we're putting on a show the same night as the tribute to the fairgrounds, and we're bringing in Larry Zbyszko. Now, what do you got to say to that? And I was like, damn it, man, this is some carny bullshit.
Right.
And I said to him, look, Mike, I've already made the commitment to this other show. I can't just back out of it. I wouldn't do that to you,
right.
Right. If I was booked for you, I wouldn't pull out to work some show downtown. I would never do that to you. That's why I gave you so much heads up. And he's like, oh, that's a shame. It's going to be a real good show that night. And I said, yeah, I'm sure it is. But, I've got to go work the fairgrounds. And I did. And so then that next week coming back to main event, everything changed. Everything was different. Every idea I brought to him was no good.
He didn't like it. Yeah.
I can think of a million different stories to tell you to reiterate that, but we can save that for the NWA main event special we do. But it wasn't the same.
Right.
And so I could tell, there was things moving and shaking around me that I could easily peep out what's happening here, and I knew my time was limited. But I also knew they were going to do another tribute to the fairgrounds show and possibly keep it going after that, and working that fairgrounds show was out of this world. I felt good working in front of that many people. It was like a TNA show, But I'm in the spot where Jeremy Borash was standing, and it felt so good. You know, it was a rush, and I wanted to feel that again, you know?
Yeah.
And so seeing that these things were happening, this is pretty historic too right here. I wrote myself out of NWA Main Event.
I remember this. And let me say one thing real quick.
How many people can say that?
I've also, because I was talking to TJ Weatherby, who was there to see Kevin at Main Event a lot. And several times he would say, you want to come out and work for me at Saw? It's Friday night gig. You're working Thursdays here. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm starting to travel some, because what I would tell Porter, I'd be like, hey, what do you know about TJ Weatherby? What do you know about Saul? Well, TJ's all right. You know, he would never really compliment him, but, you know, he would do his Porter thing. He didn't hate TJ, but he didn't want me to be there. So I was like, well, he's offered me a spot to come out there on Fridays. You think I should do it? And he was like, well, you shouldn't, because me and Bird are going to be starting doing up in Kentucky. And he did the same thing to me with the Jerry Lawler Dutch Mantel match. And again, it's like, I'm going to have you managing Dutch against the king of wrestling. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And he did that exact same thing to me. The only thing you did was have the balls to say, nah, I'm gonna do this and it'll be cool, you know. But anyway, go ahead. so
the idea then is that I know I'm on my way out the door, but that's okay, because I'm gonna start working with Marcus and doing Crossfire stuff, and I'm cool with that.
Right.
But you know, no creative, just being the voice, you know. So I had to kind of give something up to get something good.
Right.
And so I worked it out to where, and this guy is a current mayor of a suburb around Nashville, which I love. I had him come in as the NWA, you know, head office representative, and he's asking me questions. And the idea was we had 7 basically kill a guy named Mike Jones, and Mike Jones came back with brain damage.
Right.
You gotta love Aaron Camaro's story.
I love it.
He comes back with brain damage, and one week he thinks he's Hulk Hogan, and the next week he thinks he's the Ultimate Warrior, and the next week he thinks he's, you know, Ric Flair, you know, and it's always like a cheap, generic version of it. But I always got to chuckle, because when you're at the little place where we did those shows and Hulk Hogan's music comes on, everybody hops. Everybody hops on their chairs like, what? No. Oh, it's him, you know. And so we do this thing where he is trying to sue me or get me fired. And so the whole idea is, you know, he's going to hit me. I'm going to go down. I'm going to roll out of the ring. I'm going to walk out the front door. And that night, I didn't know how I was going to do it, because it's like, okay, it's going to go one of 2 ways. Either I'm going to come back next week and the people are going to see me, you know, mopping the bathroom or taking tickets or always some, you know, menial job. Like I've been severely demoted.
Right.
Or I just leave and don't come back.
Yeah.
And at that point, you know, I was so excited for what Marcus was doing with Crossfire. I was like, you know what? I just don't think I'm ever going to go back. And sadly, I regret this. That was the last time I ever spoke to Mike Porter.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you know, because I remember the last time I ever spoke to Mike Porter too, and you know, he really turns on you when you're not with him.
Yeah,
you know? And it's unfortunate, it's immature, you know, and you know, we're not here to tear down Mike Porter. I mean, he can do that.
That's just the way they did it back then. I mean, you look at guys like Burt Prentice and Mike Porter, and a lot of people will say that they hurt the independent wrestling scene around here, but you got to look at it on both sides. The damage they did may have been significant, you know, as far as reputation and things go, is like, oh, wrestling promoters are shysters, but you got to look at some of them shows those guys put on too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they put on amazing shows, and you know what? I may have had my differences with Burt Prentice, and I may have had my differences with Mike Porter, but I still respect the hell out of those guys for their history here in Nashville, and damn, some of the shows they put on over the years.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, got a question. Talking to you about a former guest of the show and a guy that we've lost too soon. Talk about working with Hot Rod Biggs and the announce team there.
Oh man, so from there I go right into Crossfire, and Crossfire becomes a thing on its own then, and I had never met Hot Rod Biggs before Crossfire. It's funny, like all the different promotions around Nashville that we'd all worked, and he'd been in it years before I was. And here I go, and Marcus introduces me to my new broadcast partner, and I'm looking like Aaron Camaro, goofy sunglasses, bandana, spangly jacket, and I'm looking at him going, oh, shit, it's Hot Rod Biggs. This guy's reputation precedes him. What the hell must he be thinking of me, looking at what a goof I am. And I go, hey, man, it's an honor and a pleasure. I hope we can do some great things together. And he was another one, like lightning, just the commentary with me and him it was on the money.
Magical.
Like I'll never forget probably my favorite, and I've got many, but my favorite Hot Rod Biggs memory is one time, one of those Crossfire shows, something went wrong with the audio in the commentary, and we had to go recut it. So Marcus took us down to some studio in Franklin or Brentwood. It was a fancy place, and so we get in there, and they put us in a booth with glass all the way around it in a circle, and they bring up Crossfire show on the TV screen, and Hot Rod and I go to town. And it starts out where there's like one or two people out there standing, watching us as we start. By the time we're done, there's a whole bunch of people crowded around this thing, listening to us do our thing. That's and when we came out, they were like, wow, guys, that was amazing. And I'm like, where'd all these people come from? Then it was like, hey, thanks, but that's how hot me and Rod were when it came to doing commentary. We just were like lightning off each other. Everything he'd say, I'd have something to say perfect right back, and he'd have a perfect rebuttal to it, and he was, I played the babyface commentator, and he played the old Jesse the Body Ventura style guy, and it really worked, and I've got so much love for Hot Rod Biggs. Like, they would take us to, like, a comic book convention and just be like, I'm going to follow you guys around with the camera, and you guys just be awesome. And talk about the show, and we just walk around this thing. There's videos of that on YouTube too.
Yeah,
me and Hot Rod just being goofballs down at the fairgrounds during a comic book convention, promoting the show. So man, that one hurt me. I'm glad I got to go see him at his funeral at least. And boy, it just didn't seem real. That Hot Rod was gone because. Heartbreaking. At that point, I feel like I'm pretty good at commentary. But then when I partner up with Hot Rod Biggs, which give it to Marcus Pastorius for having the foresight to put the two of us together, he elevated me. He made me so much better than, like, I think I'm pretty good. But then when I'm done working with Hot Rod Biggs, I'm like, yeah, I ain't never quite did it like that before. That was something.
I remember when I was working for Saw and Hot Rod was there doing the color commentary with Jack Johnson, and I'd never seen the TV show. I'd never watched the show at night. I know a lot of the guys talk about, Sunday night it's playing, you got to check it out and stuff. And I just didn't ever get to see the show, whether I just didn't have cable at the time or whatever. And I finally found them all on YouTube, and oh my gosh, Hot Rod put me over like $1 million. And I thanked him so much for that because, I didn't know that he was doing that. I thought he was doing his job, but I had no idea he was developing the storyline for us. And man, I love that guy. We'll forever miss him. And he's one of the best people I've known as far as just a real dude. You know what I mean? Just a real dude. Yeah.
One of the worst things that ever happened to me at Crossfire, other than the demise of it, was when they came to me and they were like, yeah, we're pulling you off of commentary. And I was like, what? Why? They're like, you need to concentrate on the ring announcing and doing the backstage interviews and stuff like that. We're bringing in Mike Bucci, who was Nova and Simon Dean, and he's going to call the matches with Hot Rod Biggs. And I was like, well, shit, how do I argue with that?
But
it broke my heart a little bit because I knew me and Rod had something special.
Yeah, you really did. And that was a shame. But again, you're right. You can't argue with that. But, dude, talking about Crossfire, I mean, to me, it was one of those classic examples of almost everything being right and it's still not working out in the end. Whether unfortunately money runs out or interest runs out. I mean, that was not the case with Crossfire as far as the interest. You had sold out fairground arenas and you had them sold out with the bleachers down too. That's a different story. I've been in the middle of the ring in the fairgrounds in front of 5,000 plus. There you go, dude. I mean, seriously, that's incredible. So, I mean, the things were working there, and you came on the Wolfie show, and we did a 2-part Crossfire series, and I would maybe like to redo that eventually sometime, but maybe on this show. But the one thing I would love to say is I know that Marcus sometimes ends up getting heat on him. Maybe it's due, maybe it's not due, but I know you do hold a special place in your heart for him as far as the chance that he gave you and the opportunities. And maybe you saw him from a human perspective and not just this evil promoter coming in to run everybody out, But talk a little bit about Marcus for us.
So I think the first thing that people need to understand about Crossfire that, you say, well, it was a wrestling show, it was at the fairgrounds, but in reality, what Crossfire Wrestling was a TV pilot. Yeah. That's what it was all about. That's why he spent all that money on the lighting, and what's a funny thing is I watch like NFL and I watch WWE nowadays, and they're always doing the 3D, where the back is blurred and then the guy stands out and it's like 3D video. Marcus was the first person ever that I heard of doing 3D stuff.
Yeah.
So I always kind of look at that every time I see it nowadays, and it's a normal, just regular part of a lot of shows.
Like Marcus the NFL and stuff, right? I mean, like the NFL, the WWE, all these great companies, television programs, So
he had a vision for what he was trying to portray, and the idea was that this is going to get picked up by a network, because you got to remember, at the time, Ring of Honor was kind of doing their thing and TNA was kind of doing their thing, but they weren't in their prime or where they are now, Right. So there was a lull there for a minute where it was really just WWE, unless you were really seeking out Ring of Honor or really seeking out TNA, because they were on like lesser channels.
Right.
And so there was an opportunity there, and Marcus had the vision to see it, to go, this is the time to strike. And he put that thing together as a TV pilot to get us signed. And we were close, baby. Oh, we were so close. Yeah. I had what would be the Ion contract in my hands, like given to me, saying, this is what your contract is going to look like. And the contract looked like I can quit my day job and do this Crossfire thing and make a living doing what I'm really good at.
Yeah.
Instead of having an everyday job, that's what it looked like. But then, as entertainment business goes, those things are fickle, and one week it's yes, and then next week it's no. And then it's at that point where, and this is just from my vision of it, I can't speak for Marcus or Hammerjack or Mark Anthony or anybody else that had a hand in the fall of Crossfire. But to me, it was like, it was then or never that it was going to happen.
Right.
Because it wasn't about, continuously putting on a wrestling show in Nashville. It was about getting signed to a network. When that Ion thing fell through, that was pretty much the end. And it was Hammerjack that came to me at the last show, and he's like, this is the last one, right? And I'm loving it so much that I don't want to believe it. I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. I had no idea how it was going to go, or how things were going to change, or the fact that it was going to go away, or the fact that Marcus, he sold his freaking car to try to keep Crossfire alive. He was carless for a while, and we would try to figure out a way to keep this thing going, because we knew it was good, and it was just a moment in time thing. Like, it was now or never. And once now became never, it was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, we were so close to glory, And there was a lot of drama that went along with that. There was courtroom proceedings that went along with that. I remember going to the courtroom for a thing that involved Crossfire, thinking, as much as everybody's talking shit about this, I'm expecting to walk into a courtroom and see Trent Van Dries and everybody else down the line sitting in this courtroom. And the funny thing was I was the only one there. And the judge even asked, who's this guy? And the reason I'm there, and they're like, well, he's just a ring announcer, But the reason I'm there is because I want to know the truth. Right. I want to know what really happened, because everybody's speculating so much on everything. And I'm hearing this side of the story, and I'm getting calls from Mark Anthony saying, hey, come work with us out in Cookville or wherever it was. Right. And they did like a Crossfire 2.0 out there, and I turned it down.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went to that court case to see what the real deal was, and I walked away from that knowing that Marcus wasn't the bad guy in this. He had a vision, and he really wanted to see it through to the end. But like I said, once now became never, you're kind of holding on to something that's slipping through your fingers, you know, and it sucks because I know so many people loved those Crossfire shows so much.
Oh, dude.
And I did too, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember times of being in the locker room. I'll tell you a story. One time I go back into the locker room, into this side room at the fairgrounds where the heels used to come out for TNA, and it's Jerry Lynn and it's Shane Douglas, and they're helping Paul Burchill cut a promo.
Dude.
So I slide in there and I stick myself in the farthest corner I can of that room, and I just want to soak it up. You know, if there's ever a learning experience, this is it.
Yeah.
And Paul Burchill cuts his promo, and Jerry Lynn looks over at me and goes, "That was pretty good, huh?" I was like, "Damn, that was really good." He's like, "I thought so too." And I was like, "I can't believe I'm in here."
That is awesome. And Jerry Lynn, what a great guy. We could talk a whole show about him, man. But
just the best. I got to be the ring announcer for his final match in Nashville ever. Wow. And then when all the baby faces came out to celebrate with him, he looked at me on the outside of the ring because I thought, I don't belong in there. He goes, "Get up in here." And I go, "Oh, yeah."
I mean, dude, if Jerry Lynn is telling you to come up, you're coming up. That's how it is.
You know it.
Yeah. Man,
I you never ask.
Yeah, I remember meeting him one time in Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge at you know, just before you're going into Gatlinburg, it's the last or the first as you're coming out of Gatlinburg. It's the last pancake place. It's a single level pancake place just as you're going to go through the trees to go to Gatlinburg. It's over on the left as you're going into Gatlinburg. I'm going in there. Jerry Lynn's coming out of there. And I'm like, holy crap, this is Jerry Lynn. I'm about to talk to him. And I talk to him, and then I meet him later at Saw. He just dropped by to say hi to people. And I'm like, man, do you ever remember a crazy guy just coming out of nowhere in Gatlinburg saying hi to you at a pancake place? And he's like, I do actually remember that. And I'm like, yeah, that was me. Sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. But anyway, yeah, that was just the amount of legends that we got to interact with for just not even deserving to get to do it. We just got to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we figured out a way. And you know what? I'm still doing it now. I've got a show going on right now that I'm working with that I'm super excited about.
Please talk about that. Perfect segue. Yeah.
So I went out to Ashland City because, you know, since the end of Crossfire, I really haven't done that much. You know, I've been concentrating on Decibel Geek podcast for the most part, but it's in my soul, you know, I still want to get out there and do stuff.
Yeah.
And so for a while I was doing some really fun things down in Lewisburg with Mikey Dunn's ASW, working with Lawrence, and they had a great crew down there and helping out however I can and doing some ring announcing, and just loved my time down there. And then the pandemic happened. I actually had my actual first match right before the pandemic. That's probably why everything shut down.
What caused it to shut down? I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Right, yeah, we caused it. We caused the pandemic. I'm sorry, everybody. It didn't come from a lab in Wuhan. It came from Aaron Camaro's first match in Lewisburg. But man, I love working with those guys because they're the kind of guys, Mikey Dunn and Lawrence, that are telling real stories that people can sink their teeth into. And it's like, that's what it's all about. And I did a few shows here and there in between, and a lot of them left kind of a bad taste in my mouth because, I mean, I've been there. You know, I've been working with Bill Behrens. I've been booking the show for NWA Main Event, and I've been in the ring in front of 5,000 people down for Crossfire at the fairgrounds, you know. So to work some of these shows, I feel like my standards have risen quite a bit, you know.
Of course.
So the last one I worked for, I was like, I just can't really, and I wanted to help them, but I could tell pretty quick that they were beyond any kind of help that I could offer. And so I was like, I really don't want my name associated with this, so I'm just going to kind of not come back.
Yeah.
But then I started working with Mike Green. And, you know, we all remember Steven because we worked with Steven Green at NWA Main Event, and he was such a huge, important part of that.
Absolutely.
And I was like, man, this is giving me NWA Main Event feelings, you know? This is kind of legit like that, you know? So they've got everything going on for them. They've got some really great talent. They are telling some amazing stories. They are giving the fans something to sink their teeth into. They're giving them a million reasons to forget that what they're seeing is sports entertainment, and reminding them what they're watching is professional wrestling.
Boom.
And it makes me feel good to be a part of that with them. They got a big show coming up on the 14th, which I'm hoping this comes out in time that I can promote that. But big show on the 14th in Ashland City at the National Guard Armory. These guys, man, I'm proud to be a part of CHW, because Mike Green and his sons and everybody on the roster, they're out there with a mission to deliver the best professional wrestling shows that people have seen in years.
Yeah.
And based on what I saw last time and what I expect to see on the 14th, they're going to do it.
That's awesome.
I give it a few months, and people are going to be talking about CHW out in Ashland City as the best wrestling promotion that you can go see anywhere around Middle Tennessee.
Dude, that's awesome. The way you describe it, you're a master at that. I got to say this.
All I need is a Prince Omar Alcazan, and I'll be rocking.
Man, where'd that guy go? We'll have to find him.
Can I just jump back and say one quick thing about Omar Alcazan?
Of course.
So one of my favorite things about the Prince Omar Alcazan character was that it was all based on bullshit.
Right. Right.
So anybody that really kind of squinted their eyes and looked at you could probably tell you were probably just a white boy from Virginia.
Right. Right.
But to me, and I've caught some shit over the years as like using you as the prince.
Sure.
Because it's like, well, how can you do that? Because he's a white guy. And I was like, isn't that the beauty of it?
That's the point.
Eventually, because this whole persona is based on a farce, that eventually the day comes where he gets completely exposed.
Yeah.
And when that day happens, that's going to be a big deal. And the one who's responsible for exposing him is going to get a huge rub off of that. And then you can be Jimmy Street, and it don't really matter. But you've got that, nastiness about you because you've been exposed as a fraud. And that's why I especially, not just your performance of it, which was excellent,
Thank you.
that I really love that character because it had so much mileage. And just to one day look at you and go, well, you're going to be Jimmy Street now. I always thought that was kind of lazy, and I never liked that because my vision for that character was so much more than just, we're going to do this.
Yeah, and what's funny is when it came to me at that, I was kind of feeling that the idea that I had, and it ended up happening at USWO when Tony was running out there. I talked to LT and I was like, man, Kroll's wanting to take the gimmick off of me for the TV purposes, and so I would like to do the taking off here at USWO because a lot of these people were going to Trinity Lane, and so I said I want to come out there and something will happen that Dyron accidentally pulls the thing off my head, okay? And they'll see I'm this white guy, right? I'm clearly a pale guy. And, Dutch Mantell, Burt Prentice, so many of the guys are like, that don't work,
Yeah.
But I said, what we could do is I could lose it. I could get the thing torn off of me accidentally, throw a fit, right? And then say, the reason I did it is I hate you all so much. I wanted to make you all racist. And you hated, and dude, it was pretty awesome, but there was only like 15 people there. So it didn't really have the sting that it would have, but anyway, that was how it was done. But yeah, I mean, I love that idea, the eventual babyface foiling me for good and getting rid of me, and I'll go away and come back Jimmy Street in a month or two. But, it never happened. It is what it is. We can rebook it in the future or maybe in some alternate universe that happened. You know what I mean?
That would add that to my list of regrets for Main Event because I never got to see that happen either.
Yeah. Well, golly, man, this has flown by, Aaron, I tell you. So when we kind of wrapping things up here, we always pivot to the Sheik for his final question. So take it away, Sheik.
So, Aaron, I mean, with all the stories you've told and everything like that, it's been awesome. I'm like Jimmy. It feels like we blinked and 2 hours has passed by. But if you had to look back in your career in the business, around the business, What would you say your favorite match is?
Oh boy, I've seen so many good matches. I don't even know if I could pin it down to one, to be honest with you. And Sheik, man, I love your questions because they're real thought-provoking stuff. If I was going to say, I don't know if I can say my favorite match, but I think it would be my favorite series or my favorite storyline. Okay. And I wasn't even involved in this in any way.
That's
you know,
good.
It'd be easy for me to pick something that, I wrote. Sure. And I didn't write this. This was just something I experienced. And it would be a match between Lawrence the Sharp Dressed Man and his son, Austin. Wright.
Yeah.
In Lewisburg.
Very cool.
And the reason that one jumps out to me so much is because the investment of the crowd, the emotion involved in it. And I look at a match like that and go, that's what you strive for. It's not about, doing a 450 splash off the top rope.
Right.
It's about grabbing people and making them understand. Now, everybody in their family's got buttholes in their family, and you've always had disagreements with people in your family, but you know what? They're your family, so you love them anyway.
Right.
And so to do something like that in front of people that saw this build and saw it coming for so long, and, give it up to Mikey Dunn and Lawrence for being able to take a story and really, really make it mean something. That match jumps out to me. I don't think I'll ever forget that one. I got to do commentary on it, and it was a piece of cake because you're telling people the story about a father and his son butting heads. If you can't relate to that, you probably ain't got no kids.
Right.
It's one of those things that it was the crowd. It was the crowd plus the storytelling plus, on top of that, the story being told in the ring through their actions.
Yeah, that's
that
awesome.
Drove that thing home to, and I used to hear people say it all the time, that stuff I watch on TV, I know that's all fake, but the stuff I saw here tonight, that was real.
Yeah.
And those were the people that walked out of that show that night after seeing that match between Lawrence and his son. They walked out of that going, I think that was real.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So that's the one that really jumps out at me.
And they probably had a little of agreement between themselves to bring it a little more snug. They're that family thing where they're like, look, you can hit me, so it's fine. Like they probably said, let's just do it like we do it. Because Lawrence, we all know, we've heard Lawrence's name a million times on this podcast. The Columbia era with him and all those guys down there and the Sharp Dressed Men. And, talking about the Bruise Brothers and the Wild Boys and the Mortons and the Devils and all these great legendary tag teams from Middle Tennessee. So, to me, that's incredible. And then when you have the father and son element, man, come on, that makes money all day long. But
this is something I'm really excited about too, because at that show for CHW in Ashland City on the 14th, I'm going to be doing a special interview segment with Lawrence the Sharp Dressed Man, who is making his first appearance. Hopefully it's his first of many, but he's got some kind of major announcement about his career. So we're going to all find out that together, what that is and what that means on the 14th in Ashland City at the National Guard Armory. So I'm excited for that because I've always been a huge fan of Lawrence the Sharp Dressed Man. That guy, man, he is a professional wrestling genius. And, I'm kind of excited, a little nervous to see what this announcement is going to be. That guy was trained by Tojo Yamamoto and Gypsy Joe.
Yeah.
So I am honored and just so excited to get to bring him out to the ring for an interview segment. And that doesn't even touch all the amazing matches that are happening that night. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about this one coming up on the 14th.
Dude, I wish I were coming. I need to try to find my way out there for that, or at least see a show with them because, I love the idea of a promotion to just put out a good product. And I think that's what you're describing here to me is
the
this
fans
team
deserve it.
Exactly. This team of people that are putting this together and have put this together are trying to put out the best product they can. And that's what matters. So, but, before we go, Aaron, I just want to say once again, I know I brought it up at the beginning, but I do thank you for helping me become who I became in wrestling for the brief moment that I did it. And I'm forever indebted. And anybody who's ever asked me, I've always given you props, but I wanted to give these vocal, these is, I wanted people to hear the props on air. So, I greatly thank you for everything. I want you to tell the people before you go, buddy, I want you to tell them about the greatest rock and roll podcast ever.
Well, before I get to that, man, Jimmy, I just want to thank you for being you. Because if you weren't you, I wouldn't have seen it in you to say, we need to do something. So, and that goes the same for Jared, your brother. You guys have created something amazing here. And I never get sick of listening to your show because you're talking to people, even when it's somebody I don't necessarily know or somebody I haven't crossed paths with. Like the people that I've crossed paths with, like Jeff the Crippler Daniels. I mean, man, how good was that?
Oh, I know.
He talks with Krull and the Wild Boys and all that good stuff, man. I love it. But even when it's somebody I don't even know, I feel like I come away from listening to your podcast learning something. Like if you're an astute student of the game of professional wrestling, your show is invaluable to a guy like me who's always looking to learn more. You guys, both of you nail it every time. And I love you guys for it. And this is a great show that I guess if you're listening to it, you already know. And if you happen to be listening to it just because I'm on here, this is something you need to subscribe to, because even if you don't know who they're talking to, you know what they're talking about and you know it's going to be good and you're going to come out of it as a better person. Me, myself, I just talk about rock and roll,
I'm jealous, but I love it.
So we've been doing the Decibel Geek podcast for about 12 years now. Like you said, back when, there weren't a whole lot of podcasters. It was like we're top of the charts. And then all of a sudden, all these famous people start coming out with rock music podcasts, and we get knocked down a little bit, but we're always hanging in there. We're the grassroots rock and roll podcast. Neither one of us are famous rock stars or famous radio DJs, but we care about rock and roll. And the whole thing is that if you remember back in the day, there used to be Headbangers Ball. I mean, MTV music television used to play music videos. If you young people can concept that. Yeah, no, it's real. It really happened. I mean, you could go to the grocery store and pick up a copy of Metal Edge or Hit Parade or Rip or Circus and keep up with all the latest and greatest happenings in the world of hard rock and heavy metal music, and all those things are gone. So when I had the opportunity to join Decibel Geek podcast all them years ago, I said, this is my opportunity to take my other true love, besides professional wrestling, and really try to help keep it in the spotlight where I think it deserves to be. And what we learned is that there are a lot of people all over the world that still give a damn about rock and roll music, and they want to hear people talking about it. And we've gained fans and friends from all over this planet. I mean, we have charted in crazy places that I've never even heard of, So, I mean, we got the backing of the world of people that love rock music, and we talk about the classics, whether we're talking about Zeppelin or Black Sabbath or Kiss or Aerosmith, or talking about the 80s with Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and take it all the way up to today, because the worst thing about the fact that radio is going to play the same old songs over and over again, and you're never going to get introduced to something new. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, sitting with our little tape recorders, getting ready to hear something new that we never heard before. Those days are gone. But if you want to know that rock and roll and classic metal music is still more alive and still more vibrant as it's ever been, listen to the Decibel Geek podcast, because we're going to show you the bands from today. Young kids that discovered their cool uncle's cassette tape collection up in the attic and decided to learn how to play songs. That bands like that are alive today. They got the spirit, they got the style of all the classics, and they deserve, in this landscape that we're in of music, some really talented rock and roll bands out there that just can't get the attention because, like I said, no MTV, no Headbangers Ball, no good radio stations, no magazines. Well, you got us. You got the Decibel Geek podcast. We're going to talk about the classics and everything up to today. We always have fun doing it. We interviewed Ace Frehley from Kiss not all that long ago, for crying out loud, so we must be doing something right.
So cool.
So if you love hard rock and classic metal music, then, you hear the commercial every week on this show. But let me tell you, in person, as we're speaking right now, you got to check out Decibel Geek.
You gotta. I promise you. You got to. Aaron Camaro, I love you, buddy. thank you so much for doing the podcast with us today. And, we're looking forward to putting that main event show together, and it'll be very soon. So we're just going to we just needed to sizzle it up a little bit for this episode, but we're going to really nail that home on that one, I promise. So thank you all. Thank you so much.
I thank you guys for bringing me on, man. Like I said, so many people that I consider legendary have appeared on this show before me. It makes me feel good in my heart to be on the same format as all those awesome people.
Thank you. Well, hey, we're glad you were here, and we will talk to you soon, brother. Love you, man. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Thanks, likewise, buddy. Guys. Love you too. Thank you.
All right, folks. And that was the Mouth of the North, Aaron Camaro. Stick around. We'll wrap things up with the Plastic Sheik on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to uswapodcast.com.
That's right, it's the Talk of Middle Tennessee, the channel you love to hate and the channel you hate to love. It's Brian Turner from Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. And if you're looking for matches from Wolfie D to Jerry Lawler to Dusty Rhodes, and the team that put a pimp before your eyes and a goatee between your thighs, Booty Call and Athena, go to lostwrestling.com. See, I made it easy for you. Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. Booyah.
Hey, it's the Heat Miser Scotty Blaze, and I'm inviting all of y'all to join me on my brand new podcast, Turning Up the Heat with the Heat Miser Scotty Blaze. So what are you waiting for? Come on over and join me. I'll be covering all the events of the day, global, national, pop culture, movies, gaming, whatever sounds interesting. But I'll also be playing some awesome skating shuffle music from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Anything that has a good beat, I'm going to be playing it. You can rest assured. Come on over, tuthradio.com. The podcast is on every major podcast platform. See you then.
Oh, Sheik, one more time. Every time I say this, I'm always surprised, but actually not. Great episode again. Great guest, man. I could talk to Aaron all day just about the good old days, man. And what a fun time. And I will say this. Aaron was a trooper when we first set up the call and we were doing the recording. Aaron has a nice studio. Like I said, he's been a 12-year podcasting veteran. He's worked out all the kinks, the bugs, all that. He's got a great setup at his home. And I think ours is too cheap for his because it was throwing everything off. And I will proudly say this. I don't care who hears it. But you and I, especially Wolfie and I, whatever, we ball on a budget over here, man. We don't use brand new stuff. The biggest purchase I've made is my microphone, which I think that was a good idea, And I know you put some money into a laptop to get one, but we try to keep it cheap over here. And, unfortunately, I think our setup is just not good enough for Aaron's high quality setup. So
there was some echo in there. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And Aaron is a professional. So just to let y'all know, Aaron normally has the setup that, honestly, is just better than ours. And I think it was throwing our inexpensive system off. So thank you, Aaron, for being a trooper. Listeners, I don't know that y'all noticed a difference. And if you did, I'm sorry. But if you didn't, thank you. But either way, man, great interview. Had a lot of fun in that one. Like I said, Ben Jordan's asked me before, you ought to do a Ask Jimmy Anything, or you ought to talk about yours. And I'm like, man, I just, it's so short. And it was a lot of fun, and I did a lot of cool things and met a lot of great people, as you can see from our guests. But, you know, when it comes down to it, it was just like, man, I love talking about the old days, especially when I was involved. That was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I like get a view into the life that, Prince Omar led there. So
yeah, that was fun times, man. It feels like a blur because it was, but yeah, those are good days, man. And so in the future, we are going to have an NWA Main Event specific episode, and it would be from the Aaron Camaro years. You know, so, you know, I know we have Larry Cooter and Kevin Weatherby signed up already. We're trying to get Drew Haskins. Like I said, we want 7, Nick Iggy. There's a lot of guys we want. So those will be eventual guests, and that show will eventually happen. I promise. Just trying to get everybody lined up. It's tough getting 3 schedules together, you know, so compared to that, you know, we got to figure out other stuff. But anyway, we thank you all so much for, you know, listening and enjoying us, and hopefully you're having a good time with us, and we just really appreciate y'all. You know, if you need to find anything about Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, we are always at GMBMPW on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. And I put an emphasis on YouTube because we really need y'all. We are 900 subscribers, 900. Okay. And from the numbers, I know there's more than 100 of you out there. And I'm assuming that a lot of you have already subscribed. So tell a friend, grab your loved one's phone and go on their YouTube and hit subscribe, do something. But let's get us to that 1,000 mark, man, because we're so close. We're 100 away. And, you know, somebody like Brian Turner or somebody like that, you know, they've already hit that mark long time ago, but we're still trying. So 100 away, help us close that gap, 900 to 1,000. I know there's 100 of y'all that haven't subscribed. If you have, thank you. God bless you. We greatly appreciate you. But if you haven't, just hit subscribe. Even if you don't listen to us on there, it's okay. Just hit subscribe. Help us out. Close the gap. We need 100 more people. Hit subscribe. You know, that means the world to us. It helps us in the algorithm, getting our people out there, getting our shows and stories and all that. So we thank you all for the ones that have already subscribed and the ones that follow us and share all our stuff. Y'all are absolutely the best. Can't thank you enough. But if there is one of you out there that hasn't subscribed on the YouTube, just go ahead and hit it. Just hit it. Just go ahead and hit it.
Just do it. Just do it.
Just do it. Anyway. So with that being said, that's all I got, Sheiky. What about you?
Brother, that's a good way to finish it up.
All right. Well, I'll take that cue and take her on home. Once again, for our great guest, Aaron Camaro, he's been the Plastic Sheik, and I'm Jimmy Street. We'll see y'all next time on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Don't forget.
In the ring where the lights used to shine, bodies were flying, every move was divine. Jimmy's got stories and Jared's in the mix. Let's relive the action, those legendary tricks. Take me back to that glorious fight where heroes and legends danced in the night. Give me back my pro wrestling, make it right. But Jimmy and Jared, let's ignite the night. We'll talk of our tales, the laughter and fray, reliving the magic of those epic days. With chairs and tables, we felt that sweet thrill. The crowd going wild, it gave us a chill. From stunners to suplexes, we cheered with our hearts. In this wacky world, it was all just fine arts. So give me that vibe, let's turn back the page to the times of our youth, the glory of the stage. Give me back my pro wrestling, make it right. with Jimmy and Jared. Let's ignite the night. We'll talk about tales, the laughter and fray, reliving the magic of those epic days. So bring on the matches, let's reenact the play. With the passion of wrestling, we'll never fade away. Jimmy and Jared, let's ignite the night. We'll talk about tales, the laughter and fray, reliving the magic of those epic days. So bring on the matches, let's reenact the play. With the passion of wrestling, we'll never fade away.
With a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life.
We'll see you later.
This has been a James Rock Street production.